Chapter 1086. After it was exposed that Yang Yi was the boss of micro-broadcasting or backwave technology company, Han Sun was in the limelight for a period of time in the entertainment industry. Some of the self-media summits also sent him invitations. He even gained a lot of benefits by relying on this influence. However, the good days were short-lived. Han Sun did not take the opportunity to expand. He was still a lone wolf. There were not many eye-catching reports, and he quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. On Saturday morning, Han Sun, who liked to stay up late, woke up around 11 o'clock. With a head of messy hair like a bird's nest, he rubbed his eyes while sitting in front of the computer. He browsed Weibo, some news websites, and fan forums to see if there was anything new in the entertainment industry. Yang Yi. Originally, a news headline that was not particularly popular entered his field of vision. When Han Sun saw the familiar name, he could not help but feel refreshed and read it attentively. The content of the news was nothing special. It said that Yang Yi arrived in Chengdu last night to attend Murphy's concert. However, he brought 3 children with him. In addition to Xixi and Huahua, who were more familiar to everyone, there was another child whose identity was unknown. Of course, the editor of the news still wrote a wonderful story. After all, it was an entertainment report, so naturally, it had to be written with suspense and ups and downs. He even hinted vaguely that this little girl might be the illegitimate daughter of Yang Yi and Mo Fei. Only by hinting vaguely would he not have to take responsibility. However, Han Sun was an industry insider after all. Naturally, he would not easily believe this kind of argument. When reading a report, he would at most look at some objective descriptions and photos taken by others. He would directly skip over the subjective assumptions. After Han Sun smiled disdainfully, he fell into deep thought. Who is this little girl? I can see that Yang Yi takes good care of her. Han Sun touched his chin. He felt that there was news to be found. Of course, Han Sun's tool of exploration was micro-broadcasting. After all, he also relied on micro-broadcasting for a living. Opening Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting homepage, Han Sun was surprised to see that Yang Yi had actually updated a micro-broadcasting article this morning. Bravely try to eat spicy food. Today, I came to Chengdu in Sichuan province, a beautiful city where people love spicy food. Under Xian'er's encouragement, Xixi, who had never eaten spicy food before, bravely tried spicy beef. Although she was not as good as Xian'er's ability to adapt to spicy food, Xixi's courage today, encouraged by Xian'er's encouragement, was worthy of praise. However, when I saw the way the 2 little girls were jumping around due to the spiciness, I couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha. It was just an ordinary speech with a picture of a plate of beef tofu pudding. But Han Sun couldn't help but feel refreshed. He felt that he had found the answer. This Xian'er must be the chubby little girl, Han Sun said. She must be the chubby little girl. Of course, he still had to find the answer in the comments. The micro-broadcasting article that Yang Yi had posted more than an hour ago already had more than 10,000 comments. Father-in-law, why did you post a picture of Xixi's micro-broadcasting with a dish? No. We want to see Xixi. We want to see Xixi whose lips are red because of the spiciness. Unsurprisingly, the top trending comments were similar. Han Sun was used to these people calling Yang Yi father-in-law every day. He paid more attention to the more substantive comments. For example, the following comment made Han Sun perk up. Xian'er can also eat spicy food? She grew up with Xixi in the same environment, but Xian'er can eat spicy food better than Xixi. I didn't expect this. Xian'er? Xian'er also went out to play with Xixi? In the past, every time Yang Yi made delicious food, Xian'er would be very supportive. She can eat spicy food so well today. Maybe she can't resist the temptation of delicious food? Haha. This netizen's comment unexpectedly revealed the truth. Han Sun touched his chin. He felt that these 2 comments should be from Yang Yi's old fans, and they should be the kind of hardcore fans who have been following Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting for a long time. He often watched Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, but he couldn't remember where he had seen the name Xian'er. Fortunately, under the micro-broadcasting's homepage, he could search for this person's previous posts. Han Sun typed Xian in the search box. Soon the relevant content popped up. Hey, there are quite a few. Han Sen was surprised to see that Xian Air's name appeared under Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting. Although the frequency was not high, there were still more than 10 posts. The earliest post could be traced back to 2 years ago, and the last post was just over a month ago. Shishi was still planting vegetables with Xian Air. From the micro-broadcasting, it could be seen that Xian Air was not a relative of Yang Yi and Shishi. She and Shishi were probably neighbors, or even classmates. This is interesting. They were classmates from kindergarten to elementary school, and they are so close. Moreover, Yang Yi was willing to bring her along with his daughter. Han Sen felt that it was necessary to investigate this little girl's identity in depth. Han Sen was good at finding gossip from a large amount of information. This was not only because he was tenacious, but also because he had a very sharp sense of touch. Now, he felt that this inconspicuous little girl might have some news to dig up. Not to mention the excited Han Sen, Yang Yi, Shishi, Tong Tong, and Xian Air, who had eaten and drunk to their heart's content, got into the car to the panda base after he posted on Weibo. After eating a few pieces of spicy beef, Shishi's little mouth was still a little red. Of course, she had already passed the state of blushing from the spicy beef. Her face had returned to its usual white color, but her little mouth was still a little red. However, she still looked very cute. Shishi could not wait to see the pandas in the car. She was moving around energetically. At this moment, she could not help but stand up from the chair. She hugged the headrest of the second row seat with her 2 little hands and said excitedly, "Papa, can I take my camera? Do you want to play now?" Yang Yi did not drive. They were now in an MPV nanny van with a bodyguard in the front. Yang Yi sat in the second row so that it was convenient for him to take care of Tong Tong, who was sitting in the child seat in the second row. Shishi and Lan Xian sat in the third row. There was a passage in the middle of the second row of the nanny van. If necessary, Yang Yi could go to the back to take care of the 2 little girls. Yes. Shishi quickly nodded and explained, "Because I want to play with the camera first. Otherwise, I don't know how to take pictures of the pandas. I haven't played with the camera for a long time. The last time I played with it, I took pictures of my radish." Yang Yi smiled and patted Shishi's fluffy little head. He said, "Okay, Papa will get it for you. Sit down and fasten your seatbelt. You can't take off your seatbelt by yourself. It's not safe." "Hehe, I know." Shishi sat back down obediently. Yang Yi took out the camera from the backpack on the ground and handed it to Shishi. Soon, Shishi and Lan Xian played in the back. "Xian Air, sit down. Sit down first. I want to take pictures of you. You have to smile. You can't close your mouth." "Oh, you blinked." Lan Xian also shouted, "Let me see." "Shishi, you don't even know how to take pictures. They don't look good." No, this one is gone. Let's do it again." While the 2 little girls were arguing, they arrived at the panda breeding research base. Chapter 1087. In the park, please be mindful of the volume of your voices. It's not that we don't allow you to speak, but what we mean is, please don't make any loud noises or make any sharp noises. Does anyone know why this is? At the giant panda breeding base, Yang Yi, along with his 3 children and a few other families with children, were listening to the base's expert tour guide explain the rules and regulations of the tour in the lounge. They originally wanted to hire a professional tour guide, but because it was the weekend, there were a lot of tourists who came to see the giant pandas, and the base did not have enough professional tour guides. Seeing this, Yang Yi did not insist on any special treatment. He led the children to be treated like normal tourists and received the services of a 20-person tour guide. However, this kind of service was not bad. Shishi and Lan Xian stood beside the other children and listened to the tour guide attentively. It was just like a normal class. Not only was it lively, but it also gave them a sense of participation. Tong Tong was originally being carried by his father, but he felt that he was not free enough in his father's arms, so he asked his father to put him down. Then he squeezed himself between Shishi and Lan Xian, and let the 2 sisters hold his hands. Perhaps it was because of the unfamiliar environment, but Shishi and Lan Xian, the 2 children who were good at talking, turned their heads to look around at the same time when the tour guide asked them questions. Lon Xian was looking to see who was going to answer, while Shishi was eager to try, but she was a little shy and did not dare to raise her hand. Because giant pandas need to sleep too. At this time, a younger boy who looked to be about 5 years old plucked up his courage and raised his head to speak. That's right. The tour guide smiled and clapped her hands. She looked at him encouragingly and continued, because giant pandas like quiet environments and are very sensitive to noise. If we make too much noise, they will hide. That way, we won't be able to see the giant pandas, right? Cece widened her big eyes in surprise and looked at the tour guide very attentively. It seemed that if Yang Yi gave her a pen and paper at this moment, the little girl would have to write down all of this. After listening to the explanation, they got on the long electric sightseeing bus and followed the tour guide to the giant panda's sun delivery room and the giant panda's infant villa. The lesson that the tour guide had given to Shishi and the others was very effective. Shishi and Lon Xian began to whisper on the sightseeing bus. They didn't even need Yang Yi to promise them a big ice cream. Xian Air, I forgot to tell you that when pandas were small, they were very, very small. Shishi held the camera and looked very excited, but she whispered to Lon Xian in a very low voice. Actually, there was no need to speak so softly. However, Lon Xian also abided by the rules. She was also very interested in the giant panda. Just like Shishi, she listened very carefully. At this time, she seemed to realize that her voice was too loud, so she went directly to Shishi's ear and whispered to her. I know that you have giant panda dolls at home. Some are big, and some are very small. You used to call them de xiong. After being exposed, Cece felt a little embarrassed and twisted in the seat of the battery-powered scooter. Then, she tried her best to change the topic. No, it's not like that. Papa showed me a photo. It's really small. Oh, you'll know when you see it later. The two sisters were chatting in full swing in the car. Tong Tong was also a little unwilling to be left out. He stepped on his father's leg shakily and moved his body towards his sister. Sister, please play. Daddy didn't give it to him. Little Minglan was still anxiously squeezing Daddy's arms around him, muttering as he pressed forward. Yang Yi helplessly picked him up and sat him down. Then he whispered in his ear, We don't have many seats. Sit tight, or you'll fall off. Fortunately, the electric car was very light, and they soon arrived at the place where the giant panda cubs were bred. Tong Tong also got what he wanted. He could hold his sister's hand and walk with her. Why didn't he like to walk with his father? It was because it was hot to be hugged by his father, and he was not free. His sister's height was just right for him to hold his little hand, so he felt as safe as his father. Moreover, Shishi treated Tong Tong very well. Lon Xian was a little impatient with holding Tong Tong's hand all the time, but Shishi was still very considerate, and gently held her brother's little hand in her palm. Fortunately, because of the tour guide's explanation, the group didn't walk very fast. Although Tong Tong was short and had short legs, his small steps were compact, so he could still keep up with everyone's pace. After turning a corner, Shishi's eyes suddenly lit up. She hurriedly held Lon Xian's hand and didn't dare to say anything. She just pursed her lips and smiled happily. Look. Thus, the two girls moved closer to the glass partition and looked curiously. When the tour guide in front saw that everyone had walked over, she said, This is the room for the baby pandas that were born less than a month ago. Of course, they usually have to stay by their mother's side and be taken care of by her. The tour guide was still talking when she suddenly felt a tug on her sleeve. She looked down and saw a girl with neat bangs and braids. The tour guide's first impression of her was that she was pretty, especially her big bright eyes. Even though she was looking at her anxiously and frowning slightly, her big bright eyes were still very beautiful. She didn't have to guess to know that this girl was Shishi. She still lowered her voice and said anxiously, Sister, you can't talk too loudly. When the tour guide heard this, she smiled and said, It's fine here. Our room has double-layered soundproof glass, and there are some soundproofing settings inside, so we won't disturb the baby pandas when we talk here. When I said not to talk too loudly, I meant that when we go outside and see the pandas in the activity area, we'll just have to keep our voices down. Of course, you're also great for thinking of taking care of the baby pandas. She suddenly understood. She smiled shyly and blushed. She turned her head and ran back to her father's side, continuing to hold Tong Tong's hand. But everyone is lucky because last Tuesday, a mother panda called Curly Curly gave birth to 2 baby pandas. Because, the tour guide continued, and explained why everyone could see the baby pandas in this place. The children listened attentively. When they heard something interesting, they even gasped in surprise. Tong Tong was held by his sister's hand. He learned from his sister and looked at the tour guide attentively. Of course he didn't understand. This was because when the tour guide said that if twins were born, the mother panda would choose to take care of the stronger panda cub and abandon the weaker one. Regardless of whether it lived or died at this time, Tong Tong, who was listening attentively like his sister, didn't reveal the same shocked expression as his sister. He also didn't show the seriousness of a crisis. He still looked around in confusion. The little guy's confused expression seemed to be asking, "Why are you making such a big fuss over nothing?" Chapter 1088. It turned out that the keepers at the giant panda base had secretly stolen a baby panda when its mother, Curly Wan, wasn't paying attention. Then they arranged for the baby panda to be taken care of by its mother. That was why she and the others had the opportunity to see the newborn baby panda. It's really small. Lon Xian stood in front of the glass partition and looked at the baby panda sleeping soundly on the small quilt. Obviously, she really didn't expect the baby panda to look like this. It was only about the length of an adult's palm. Yeah, I've seen pictures of the baby panda. She stood beside her and stared at the baby panda. Since there was no restriction on her voice, she could speak freely. However, the young lady was still reluctant to speak too loudly. It was as if even the slightest movement would disturb the baby panda's sleep. She realized something. She was a little excited, but she suppressed her voice and whispered, Xian Air, look, the baby panda is moving in its sleep." "Oh, it's true. It's moving its legs." Lon Xian nodded happily. Little Momo was too small. Even if he stood on his tiptoes, he still couldn't reach the height of the wall. However, when he saw that his sister and the others were chatting animatedly, and he didn't know what they were looking at that was so interesting, he became anxious. "Sister." Tong Tong grabbed his sister's arm with one hand and tried to squeeze his body between his sister and the other. He even tried to step on his sister's foot with his little shoe, as if this could increase his visibility. "Hua, I want to see." She was pushed back by him. However, the young lady understood her brother's intention. She enthusiastically reached out and hugged Tong Tong's armpits. She tried to lift Tong Tong up so that he could see the baby panda. "Big sister will carry you, then you can watch." Shi's labored voice reached Yang Yi's ears. Yang Yi looked down and couldn't help but smile. However, Shi's efforts were in vain. Soon, she helplessly put down the Tong Tong and complained, "A little brother, you're too heavy. How can you eat so much? You weren't this heavy before." This was different from last night when she carried Tong Tong onto the chair. At that time, she was sitting on the chair and had to drag Tong Tong onto the chair. Now that she was carrying Tong Tong, it was naturally more tiring. "Let Daddy do it." Yang Yi smiled and bent down to pick up Tong Tong from the ground. This way, little Momo could finally look at the baby pandas with his sisters. He curiously stuck his head out to look while grinning from ear to ear. He was very happy. "What are you laughing at?" Yang Yi smiled and scratched the little guy's nose. "Didn't you abandon Daddy and only want to play with Big Sister?" Tong Tong ignored him. Childish. Looking at the baby pandas was quite interesting. Even after leaving the nursery, Shi and Lon Xian couldn't help but chatter about how the baby pandas didn't have dark circles under their eyes and thick black hair circles like their mother. "Daddy, why do you think the baby pandas look like that when they're born?" Shi and Lon Xian's discussion was fruitless, so they simply ran over to their father and asked curiously, "They don't look like their mom and daddy at all." "Because they don't look like them. They're so small," Lon Xian said matter-of-factly. "That's not it. When I was young, many people said that I looked like my mom," Shi retorted with a pout. Yang Yi listened to their argument and laughed happily. "Well, this world is very strange. Many animals don't look like their parents when they're young." Look at the baby frog. Aren't they just tadpoles when they're young? Of course, there's also a possibility that when the baby pandas were born, their mother ran out of ink, so they don't look as black as they do now. She ran out of ink. Shishi and Lon Xian both looked at Yang Yi in surprise. Yang Yi nodded seriously. Then let's go buy some ink and help it darken a little. Papa, is that okay? Cici said kindly. Haha. Of course, Yang Yi was just joking. After a while, Shishi and Lon Xian were led by the tour guide to see a few baby pandas that were between 30 and 60 days old. Their questions were also answered. The baby pandas at this stage were obviously more adorable. Not only were they round and no longer looked like little worms, but they also had black circles and a black back. The only difference between them and a normal panda was their size. It was worth mentioning that Shishi and Lon Xian also learned an interesting piece of information. Auntie. A child ran over and asked the tour guide seriously. Auntie, may I ask why the baby pandas are called baby pandas? Of course it's called baby pandas. Because it's a baby. The tour guide didn't understand what he meant at first. That's right. I think it should be called little panda. Because it's a baby. My mom also calls me Xiaoming, but my name is Ming Ming. The child explained naively. Shishi and Lon Xian heard the commotion and looked over curiously. In fact, they had the same question in their hearts. The tour guide laughed and said, I see. But I want to tell you a little bit of information. If someone asks you this question in the future, you can proudly tell them that you know why. The battle of titles was all kinds of open and covert attacks. The child didn't understand and even nodded happily. Why don't we call the baby pandas little panda? That's because the giant panda is the name of its entire species. It's just like how we call cats cats and dogs dogs. Giant pandas are all called pandas regardless of whether they're big or small, male or female. But red pandas are different. Red pandas are another type of animal. Shishi listened attentively, her eyes shining with excitement. I learned something new again. Hurry up and write it down. I'll tell Mom when I get back tonight. Mom can't even come to see the pandas. What a pity. The baby pandas are really cute. The little girl thought to herself. Hee hee, but it's okay. I took a picture of the baby pandas. While playing, she could still think of her mother who was working. Would Murphy cry tears of joy if she knew that her daughter was so sensible? The tour guide snapped her fingers and smiled. Oh right, next to our panda sun delivery room, there's an area for little pandas to move around. Let's go take a look now and see what the little pandas look like, okay? Okay. There were quite a number of children in this 20-person tour group, and they all screamed in joy. Cici and Lon Xian were still rather reserved, but the few little boys beside them were all jumping in joy. Chapter 1089. To everyone's surprise, the red panda was very popular among the children, especially when they saw its beautiful reddish-brown fur with white fur in its ears and cheeks. What was even more beautiful was its fluffy tail, which had circles of white rings spreading out like water ripples. Wow! It's so beautiful! It's so cute! When they saw these petite and exquisite red pandas, the children exclaimed one after another. At this time, the tour guide raised a finger and shushed them. She lowered her voice and said, Here, we have to keep our voices down. Look, there are red pandas sleeping on the trees. Perhaps the previous training had worked, but the little ones didn't dare to make a sound. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She just had a new discovery and wanted to say it out loud. She held it in and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She pulled her father's hand and motioned for him to come over, and listened to her whisper. Yang Yi squatted down and bent down. She squeezed in front of her father. Her left hand was still holding Tong Tong, but her right hand was on her father's shoulder to support him. Then she lowered her voice and whispered, Papa, look at the red panda. Yang Yi nodded and smiled, indicating that he saw it. Doesn't it look like a little squirrel? She said, her beautiful big eyes shining with excitement. Like a little squirrel? It doesn't look like it. Yang Yi said with some surprise as he looked over again. He looked carefully, but he didn't think that the red panda looked like a squirrel. Its body shape, face, fur color, and so on were all very different from a squirrel. It looks like it. She pouted unhappily. She twisted her little butt and muttered, "Papa, look at its tail. It's so cute, just like a little squirrel's tail." Yang Yi understood. He changed his way of thinking and sighed with emotion at the children's unconstrained thoughts. Then he said with a smile, "Well, this is indeed a relatively similar place. You can take a picture of the red panda, and then go back and think of a short story. For example, the red panda and the little squirrel met on the road, and they both felt that the other's tale was very similar to theirs. Then a series of interesting episodes will be triggered and written in your diary." Shishi's eyes lit up and she nodded vigorously. "I also want to tell this story to Mom." Shishi muttered happily as she picked up the camera in her hand. Tong Tong's hand was released by his sister. He was still looking at the red panda, but when he turned around, he saw his sister take out the camera. Shishi had taken a lot of photos of Tong Tong today. Tong Tong raised his right hand almost reflexively and raised 2 fingers. However, Shishi wasn't taking photos of him. Moreover, Shishi didn't even notice her brother's peace sign. She fiddled with the camera excitedly and aimed it at the red panda lazily basking in the sun on the tree. Yang Yi was overjoyed when he saw this scene. He simply took out his phone and turned on the camera. He smiled and said, "Come, come, come. Sister won't take photos of you. Daddy will take photos of you." It was the concert from that year, but it wasn't in the same city. Fortunately, it was still the same people from that year. Hee, you have a romantic encounter. I want to post it on micro-broadcasting and WeChat. No way. Zhongjinjin, I'm going to kill you. On the campus of Sichuan University in Chengdu, a pair of beauties were sitting under the shade of a tree in an open-air milk tea shop on campus. They were chatting and laughing as they fought over their phones. However, unlike the beautiful students in Sichuan University, they weren't university students. Chu Fangfang and Zhong Jinjin were playing the role of tourists. Almost 3 years ago, Murphy held a concert in Shanghai. They were still third-year students at Shanghai University of Technology, so they bought tickets and went in to listen to the song. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, the two of them had changed a lot. Chu Fangfang stayed in Shanghai for her postgraduate studies, while Zhong Jinjin went to Yangcheng. Of course, she also had a passionate relationship that made her sad. At the end of last year, when Murphy released her new album, Zhong Jinjin broke up with her boyfriend and went to Yazhou in Qionghai to relax. Ever since she listened to Murphy's album, Zhong Jinjin felt that she should go to Murphy's concert again. She talked to Chu Fangfang, who was still her best friend, and the two of them hit it off and made a decision. Unfortunately, Murphy was no longer the unpopular Murphy from before. She was the new heavenly queen of the Chinese music industry. Although she used technical means to limit scalpers from inflating the price, it was still difficult to get a ticket. Especially for the Shanghai station that was held before, Zhong Jinjin was surprised to find that the tickets were all snatched up in the blink of an eye. Zhong Jinjin had no choice but to try her best to get tickets for every concert. Finally, at the Chengdu station, she got tickets for both her and Chu Fangfang. One person could buy at most 2 tickets. They couldn't wait until the Yangcheng station. Maybe there would be no tickets then. Fortunately, they were all students. Although they sometimes had to do experiments, it was still relatively easy for them to apply for leave. Moreover, it was not bad to come to Chengdu. It just so happened that they could also travel and see the beautiful scenery of the southwest. It was the same today. The concert was at night. During the day, Chu Fangfang and Zhong Jinjin went to Sichuan University to stroll around. In the afternoon, they planned to go to Jinli Ancient Street and Wuhou Temple. However, what was interesting was that when they were drinking milk tea and resting just now, Chu Fangfang was hit on by a boy. Although Chu Fangfang declined the other party, Zhong Jinjin felt that this was something worth laughing at. We sisters still have the charm, and there are actually little boys who are fascinated by us. Naturally, Chu Fangfang didn't agree. The two joked around for a while before they quieted down. Hey Fangfang, look. The micro-broadcasting that Yang Yi just sent is so interesting. Zhong Jinjin pointed at the phone excitedly and showed it to her friend. Chu Fangfang leaned over and looked at the phone screen. She read it out loud. You stand in front and look at your sister. Sister stands in the high place. looking at the little panda. You think that you are decorating other people's scenery, but they don't have you in their viewfinder. What a sad story this is. Ha ha. This was the second time that Yang Yi had adapted someone else's cliffhanger. Although the adaptation was very bad and it was obvious that it was done in a hurry, the content was still very interesting. The three ha-ha-ha-s were not Chu Fangfang's own laughter, but Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting habit. Of course, this time there was a photo. Both Chu Fangfang and Zhong Zhenjin saw that in the photo taken by Yang Yi's phone. She was holding the camera and taking pictures of things in front of her, but Tong Tong was standing in front of his sister. Oh, he's so cute. Look, he even put up a peace sign, thinking that his sister is taking pictures of him. Chu Fangfang laughed happily. Yes. Zhong Zhenjin also laughed. I feel that Tong Tong is so pitiful, but I still can't help but want to laugh. By the way, what time is it now? Yang Yi just came last night, and this morning he took the child out to play. Chu Fangfang's thoughts jumped a bit, and she suddenly thought of the concert tonight. What about the concert tonight? Is he not going to sing tonight? I don't know, but I think that Yang Yi will attend. From what I remember, he has never missed any of Murphy's concerts, and he also knows that everyone is attending Murphy's concert because of him and Murphy at the same time. The guest of honor is the Iron Yang Yi. Zhong Zhenjin held her chin and tilted her head as she spoke. It's hard to say. There are quite a few celebrities who came to sing for this concert. One of them is the first season champion of China's Top Voice, Su Lu, and I'm teacher Su Linglong. Who knows, Yang Yi might not sing. Chu Fangfang guessed. I don't care. Zhong Zhenjin shook her head and said coquettishly, I just want to hear Yang Yi sing. And he and Murphy are going to sing together. If he doesn't sing, I'm going to boo him. Chu Fangfang pursed her lips and smiled, then said, hurry up, tell him on micro-broadcasting, he might still be looking at his phone. Chapter 1090. Many netizens who were paying attention to the concert in Chengdu were asking if Yang Yi would be singing tonight, but at this time, Yang Yi had already thrown his phone into his pocket. He was going to the bamboo restaurant in the giant panda base with the children. There was a famous bamboo banquet to try. Before Yang Yi came, he had heard about the unique delicacies in this scenic area. This time, naturally, he went because of the reputation. Why so early? It was only 11 o'clock, and they were already going to eat at the restaurant, because this restaurant was too popular. According to the netizens' guides, if they didn't go early, there might not even be a seat in the main hall, let alone a private room. When it came to food, Lan Xian was very interested. After getting off the electric scooter, she ran in front and asked, Papa Yang, what is a bamboo banquet? Are we going to eat bamboo like the giant pandas? No, the bamboo that the giant pandas eat is hard. We should eat bamboo shoots, bamboo fungus and the like. Yang Yi explained, it's soft. You should have eaten bamboo shoots before, right? Bamboo fungus is slightly different. It's a fungus, a kind of mushroom that grows on bamboo. Bamboo shoots, bamboo fungus? Lan Xian looked at Yang Yi with some confusion. She didn't quite understand, but since her father said it was delicious, she was willing to try it. But if we eat the bamboo, won't the giant pandas have no bamboo to eat? She asked worriedly. Don't be afraid. The giant pandas have a lot of bamboo to eat. They can't eat all of it. Yang Yi laughed. Look at them. They eat too much bamboo, and then they don't exercise. They just lazily bask in the sun all day. You can help them eat some, and you can help them lose weight. She liked this explanation very much. She shook off her sadness and said with a smile, I know, I can help Xian Air eat more and help her lose weight. Lan Xian immediately protested, No, I don't want to lose weight. Yang Yi was amused by their conversation. After laughing, he shook his head and said, I don't need your help. Xian Air has been exercising a lot recently. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to save 4 gold coins, right? Besides, if you help Xian Air eat, what if you get fat? Yes. Lan Xian felt that this saying was very much in line with Zhen. So she beamed with joy and nodded her head. Then I'll help my brother eat. She rolled her eyes. Thinking of her increasingly serious brother, she had an idea. Tong Tong hadn't been paying attention earlier, and had been looking at the swans in Swan Lake. Now that he heard his sister calling him, he turned his head around with an innocent look on his face. The bamboo restaurant was indeed worthy of its name. The interior decoration of the entire restaurant echoed the theme of bamboo and pandas. For example, the brown bamboo reliefs on the walls and the support pillars were wrapped in green and smooth ceramic. They were protruding into the shape of bamboo. Of course, Yang Yi had booked a small private room. After they sat down, a waiter came over with the menu not long after. Shi and Lan Xian were very curious about what kind of dishes could be made with bamboo. Therefore, when their father finished making milk powder for Tong Tong, and was about to order the dishes, they dragged their chairs over, climbed up, and looked at the dishes together. As expected, Lan Xian asked the question she was most concerned about. Is there meat? Is there a lot of meat? Actually, Lan Xian was asking Yang Yi this question, but the waiter next to them recognized Yang Yi. She enthusiastically answered, "Yes, there is meat in many dishes. For example, our pineapple sweet and sour pork, kung pao bamboo fetus, stir-fried pork with fresh bamboo shoots, kidney bean sauce beef brisket, stir-fried pork with bamboo shoots, stir-fried twice-cooked pork with bamboo shoots, etc. They all have meat in them." She was quite fluent in naming the dishes. Perhaps she learned it from a crosstalk class. However, these dishes all had meat in them. Especially when she heard the twice-cooked pork, Lan Xian thought of Yang Yi's delicious twice-cooked pork, and couldn't help but swallow her saliva. Pineapple sweet and sour pork, kidney bean sauce beef brisket. Yang Yi followed the waiter and read out a few names. Then he looked up and asked curiously, "Are these dishes special here? Does it also belong to the bamboo banquet?" The waiter, who had just taken notes, casually replied, "No, these are just the home-cooked dishes provided by our restaurant. As for the bamboo banquet, because there are only a few of you, I don't recommend ordering the bamboo banquet directly. The portion is too large, and it would be a waste if you can't finish it. You can order some of the more special dishes in the bamboo banquet, such as mountain pepper bamboo cover, bamboo mushroom slippery shrimp, pickled pepper bamboo mushroom eggs, bamboo tripe fried eggs, crab bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo feast assorted dishes, etc." She quickly listed a bunch of dishes, and then she remembered that she had just asked the customer to order less. She said with some embarrassment, "Of course, I mainly recommend bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs, crab and bamboo bird's nest, especially the bamboo bird's nest. Although it's called bird's nest, it's actually a relatively rare fungus. It tastes like bird's nest, and it's very fresh and tender." Perhaps she wanted to try hard to show off in front of Yang Yi, so the waiter still introduced a lot of dishes. Yang Yi was very polite. After listening patiently, he smiled and said, "Well, you can cross out what I just said. Since we're here, we won't order any home-cooked dishes. We'll order the bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs you just mentioned." Yang Yi ordered a few dishes and Lan Xian listened attentively. She didn't want to take the menu and look at it by herself like Shi, so she paid attention to what Yang Yi ordered. But after listening for a while, she became a little anxious. These are all without meat. Yang Yi had no choice but to cross out 2 special dishes and order 2 dishes with meat for her, such as the bamboo stir-fried twice-cooked pork that Lan Xian couldn't forget. "This is a little spicy," the waiter kindly reminded them. Just now, Shi also asked if some of the dishes were spicy. "It's okay, I can eat spicy. This morning, I ate spicy beef." Lan Xian stuck out her small chest and said proudly. The waiter was really a good person. She pursed her lips and secretly smiled, and then explained again. "Actually, what we said is a little spicy. Maybe for some of you travelers who don't eat spicy food, it's very spicy." Yang Yi couldn't help but want to laugh. He shook his head and said, "It's okay, just order. It's just right for them to try spicy food. It just so happens that there are non-spicy dishes. If they can't eat it, they can change." The waiter gently nodded and didn't persuade anymore. "Do you need anything else?" Yang Yi nodded and said, "There's no need to order food here. Help me order the bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs and the crab and bamboo bird's nest. Pack it up. Can you help me get a good insulated lunch box? Money is not a problem, because I'll take it with me when I go back in the afternoon. Obviously, this was ordered for Murphy. Yang heard that these two dishes had high nutritional value and tasted good, so he was thinking about it. No matter what, he had to bring one for Murphy. No problem. The waiter smiled and said, but actually I have a suggestion. Because the crab and bamboo bird's nest are soaked in the soup for a long time, the taste will be a lot worse. Do you want to change it to bamboo bird's nest pot? It's like a piece of soft pancake, and it tastes good. Okay, change it to this. Yang nodded. Then that's it. Thank you for your trouble. However, Shishi still had something to say. She anxiously took her father's hand and said, Papa, there's also big ice cream. Yes, there was still the big ice cream that Yang promised on the plane yesterday. When he got off the plane, he said that Shishi and Lan Xian were both very good, and they would eat big ice cream when they went to see the pandas today. Ice cream was not only liked by Lan Xian, but also by Shishi. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't eat in the park, in fact, it was just that they couldn't litter or feed their own food to the pandas, Shishi misunderstood. She would have pestered her father to eat ice cream. Yes, let's eat ice cream first. Lan Xian felt that when Shishi asked this question, the whole room was bright, and she also clapped her hands happily. Do you have ice cream in this restaurant? Yang saw that the two girls were looking forward to it, so he turned to ask the waiter who stopped. We don't have ice cream here. The waiter hesitated and said, but the Panda Cafe next door has ice cream. We can call them and ask them to send it over. Yang nodded and said with a smile, okay, thank you. Then the waiter changed several times. Everyone found an excuse to pour tea, change the water, and even bring ice cream. The ones who came were the two blushing waitresses from the cafe. Yang didn't reject them and signed for them generously. Time to eat ice cream. When there were other people around, Cece was still a little reserved. Now that the door of the private room was closed, the little girl cheered and pounced on Lan Xian. I'll eat the strawberry-flavored one and you eat the vanilla one, okay? Lan Xian had already opened the lid, secretly dipped the ice cream with a small spoon, and licked it with her tongue, looking satisfied. However, Lan Xian was caught in a dilemma when it came to the choice of flavor. She hesitated for a moment before saying, but I also want to eat strawberry and vanilla flavors. Hey, that won't do. You have to choose one, because one of them is mine, Shishi said. It would be great if I could eat two. Lan Xian sighed and looked at the ice cream ball in a small paper bowl like Häagen-Dazs, and said with some difficulty, to be honest, these two ice creams weren't big, but in front of delicious food, they forgot the difference between size. No, eat two, or you won't be able to eat later. Yang shrugged and smiled. Make a choice, next time I'll eat another flavor. Although the ice cream ball could be cut, Yang felt that it wasn't easy to cut it. Instead of dividing it unequally and causing a conflict, it was better to let her learn how to make a choice. In life, how could there be so many perfect things? Well, I'll eat vanilla. Shishi likes strawberry. Lan Xian finally made a difficult decision, and reluctantly pushed the strawberry to Shishi. Of course, her eyes were still constantly darting around, as if she was afraid that others would see her reluctance. It's okay, I'll let you taste it. You can eat 2 spoonfuls. Shishi thought for a moment and said. Lan Xian's face lit up and she said generously, then you can eat 2 spoonfuls of mine. Like this, we can taste different flavors. Yang gently raised his eyebrows and looked at the two girls who were sitting together and whispering. He didn't expect that they would find a solution to the problem themselves. The two sisters were eating happily, and the way their eyebrows were dancing made little Momo, who was only holding a milk bottle and drinking milk, feel moved. He stuffed the milk bottle into his father's hand, and then walked over to the chairs where his sisters were sitting. The little guy first raised his head for a moment, then pressed on his sister's thigh and looked at his sister with pleading eyes. Sister, I want it too. He wants it too. Lan Xian looked over and said vaguely with a wooden spoon in her mouth. Then little brother should try it too. Shishi turned her head and looked at Tong Tong. Then she took her small spoon and scooped a piece for Tong Tong, just like what she did at the coffee shop. However, compared to last time, Tong Tong only had one sister, now he had 2 sisters. Lan Xian saw that Tong Tong was eating happily, so she was generous and said, "Hey, come here, I'll give you a spoonful too. Sister, this one is vanilla." Since there was a sweet and cold ice cream to eat, Little Swan and I was naturally very happy. He ran in a circle and ran towards the ice cream. "But there's only one spoonful here. There's no more." Lan Xian let Little Tao Wu have a small spoonful of ice cream, only to discover that Little Tao Wu was still smacking his lips as he looked at her with a smile. She looked at the small amount of ice cream left in her little bowl, and was instantly struck by a sense of crisis as she hurriedly shielded her little bowl with a pout. Actually, it didn't matter because after they finished the ice cream, there were many bamboo shoots and dishes that looked, smelled, and tasted good. No one was hungry this afternoon. Instead, because of these fresh delicacies, Cici and Lan Xian's appetites were greatly stimulated. Both of them ate until their stomachs were bulging, and they yelled that they would come again next time. Time passed by slowly. Gradually, night fell, and there were already people waiting outside the concert venue to enter the venue to watch the concert. However, in a dark little room, someone was angrily tapping on the keyboard. "Breaking news, breaking news, breaking news." Han Sun was flustered and exasperated, and he cursed. Han Sun spent so much time today, crazily investigating the little girl's identity. Finally, a few minutes ago, he found the little girl's information through the contacts of several people who Yang Yi followed, and after a whole day of micro-broadcasting, his eyes were almost blind. However, just when he was overjoyed, thinking that he had unearthed some incredible information, and was about to organize the clues and information so that he could expose it at night, Han Sun was shocked to discover that there was a gossip media account that had already revealed Lan Xian's identity before he did. "Do you think Yang Shi is the richest 7-year-old girl? Wrong. It's the unremarkable fat girl beside her who is the one." A very gimmicky title. There was nothing wrong with the content. An employee of Lans Haokai's company anonymously disclosed to this media account for a fee. He even provided a candid photo of Lans Haokai bringing his child to the company, pointing out that Lan Xian was the daughter of Lans Haokai, a shareholder of Sahara Online Mall, and a real estate tycoon who had been in the headlines a few times recently. The shares of Sahara Online Mall should be more valuable than Backwave. After all, the profitability was not on the same level. Lans Haokai also had a real estate company worth billions, while Lan Xian was an only daughter, and Shishi had a younger brother. The gap in value seemed to be able to be distinguished. This news had been crazily reposted by other media outlets. But this glory originally belonged to him, Han Sun. How could this not make him crazy? How could it not make him crazy with jealousy? However, Han Sun's eyes were red, and he still sat back in his chair, thinking angrily, "No, there must be more information here. This time, I won't be slower than anyone. Give me back everything that belongs to me." Chapter 1091. Unknowingly, it was already late into the night. Murphy's concert in Chengdu was already in its second half. For some reason, Zhong Zhenjin, who was particularly excited tonight, held Chu Fangfang's hand and screamed, cheered, and sang along with Murphy. Her voice was almost hoarse from all the shouting. At this moment, Murphy had just finished singing her last song. She held the microphone in her hand and said in her clear and pleasant voice, "Actually, today, I know that you've all been looking forward to the appearance of someone." Hearing her say this, the audience below the stage boiled over. Zhong Zhenjin was also very excited and shouted Yang Yi's name along with the audience. Why were they so excited? Because before the concert began, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Zhong Zhenjin was eating while browsing micro-broadcasting on her phone. In the end, she saw a new micro-broadcasting from Phoebe Studios' official website. "I don't know if my salary will be deducted, but today the official broadcaster can't hold it in any longer. I want to secretly tell everyone that the fans who bought tickets to the concert in Chengdu are in luck. That hot man and the lady boss have secretly prepared a big surprise for you all. Hee hee, you know what I mean." "What surprise? What other surprise could there be?" Zhong Zhenjin knew that Yang Yi and Murphy had never cared about the rules of the entertainment industry, nor did they play their cards according to the routine. When others released a song, they would record the album, do some publicity, start selling it, and then participate in a chart-topping program. But they didn't care. Publicity? None. A chart-topping program? They might participate, but they might also not. Records? Up until now, they had only released 2 major records and a small special, so they didn't care about the sales of their songs. From the fans' point of view, these 2 were mavericks. If they had good songs, they would directly throw them out to the fans on the program or at the concert. Of course, the fans were more willing to see them do this. After all, this was also a benefit. From this micro-broadcasting, it was very likely that Yang Yi would bring a new song tonight. Moreover, he would be singing with Murphy. How could Zhong Zhenjin and the others not be excited? Back at the concert, Yang Yi walked up leisurely from backstage in a black slim-fit suit under everyone's cheers, forming a sharp contrast with Murphy's white dress. Murphy also did not go backstage as everyone expected. Instead, she stood sideways with both hands holding the microphone in front of her. Her eyes were filled with joy as she looked at Yang Yi and watched him approach step by step. Yang Yi rarely wore a suit when he went on stage, but it had to be said that he was handsome in a suit. That pair of long legs was enough to cover up the flaws of his masculine, but not handsome enough appearance. What's more, wasn't the charm of a mature man a reflection of his handsomeness? After Yang Yi came up, he naturally took Murphy's hand, and the 2 of them walked to the front of the stage at the same time. After exchanging a few pleasantries with the audience, Yang Yi cut to the chase. Actually, songwriting is a very contradictory thing, because a songwriter can't be limited to one kind of theme, and can't only look for inspiration from his own experience. Because once you restrict your own thinking, your creation will soon reach a dead end, and you won't be able to produce any wonderful works. The fans below the stage laughed and cheered excitedly because they felt that since Yang Yi mentioned this, he must be bringing a new song. But why do I say it's contradictory? Yang Yi smiled and said, because when I wrote some songs about the love between Murphy and me, some people would say that it was a bit boring to listen to sweet love songs every day. They still prefer to listen to songs like Listen to the Sea, that have a bit of meaning. Although I don't quite understand what the meaning of meaning is. He spread his hands and the fans below the stage burst into laughter. So for Murphy's album last year, I specially wrote some sad songs. Some of the inspirations for these songs came from some reports or examples in life, and some were completely constructed out of thin air. It was like shooting a movie fantasy, looking for inspiration. Yang Yi's tone was a bit helpless. When the album came out, the response was very warm and very popular, but many fans were very concerned and worried about whether there was a problem with my relationship with Murphy. They said that after listening to the new album, they couldn't believe in love anymore. In the midst of the laughter, Yang Yi raised his voice a little, cupped his hands and said, "Of course I appreciate your kindness. But I still hope that you can have a little more expectation for love. No matter what others are like, no matter what setbacks you have encountered, you must believe in the beauty of love." Murphy, who had been standing beside Yang Yi with a smile, nodded at this moment. She raised her head slightly and looked at Yang Yi. Anyone could see the admiration in her eyes for Yang Yi. Although it was not like those little fangirls' eyes that lit up when they saw their idols, the appreciation, love, and indulgence in her eyes made people feel her feelings for Yang Yi. So, although I'm only singing one song today, this song is to be sung with Murphy, and it's a newly written song. I hope it can arouse your beautiful expectations for love. According to the statistics, there are many young friends here. I hope all of you can bravely find your own beautiful love. Yang Yi concluded. Finally, Murphy also raised the microphone and said the name of the song with a smile. A little tempting. I hope everyone can like it. Below the stage, Zhong Zhenjin was so excited that her eyes were filled with tears. She could no longer cheer with the others. She could only wave the light stick with her right hand. Chu Fangfang was a little calmer. She helplessly had one hand grabbed by Zhong Zhenjin, who also raised it and swayed it. The beautiful prelude led by the piano sounded. Yang Yi raised the microphone, turned slightly, looked at Murphy affectionately, and sang in a slightly high voice. "You and I, men and women, can't escape love. Who is willing to have the courage to give his heart at all costs?" Murphy also raised the microphone and sang along. "You're not just talking about you, but also about myself. below the stage, Chu Fangfang and Zhong Zhenjin also listened carefully. Zhong Zhenjin was intoxicated by the song and lyrics, while Chu Fangfang listened more carefully. While listening, she gently shook her head and sighed. Yang Yi's voice, "There's no one else." No one could hear her sigh, because the scene was too noisy. But Chu Fangfang's sigh was not wrong. She heard that Yang Yi's singing of this song seemed to be very different from the other songs he sang. For example, his voice was much more delicate, unlike the vicissitudes of his singing of Love of a Lifetime, or the softness of his singing of Silence is Golden. It seemed that Yang Yi reflected a different type of singing in every song. This kind of singing, maybe if he went to the I Am a Singer live, he wouldn't be afraid of everyone? Chu Fangfang sighed in her heart. It's said that Murphy's singing is excellent. Now it seems that there is an even more amazing man behind her. Yang Yi is just too low-key and doesn't want to overshadow Murphy's light. I'm a little tempted by you, but I'm so afraid to look into your eyes. I'm a little tempted, a little hesitant, but I don't believe that I can't help myself. While Chu Fangfang was analyzing Yang Yi's singing, Zhong Zhenjin was already intoxicated by the lyrics of the song. Especially with the lyrics, Yang Yi and Murphy's perfect evasive and coquettish gazes on the stage made people feel that a strong smell of PDA permeated the air above the venue. But everyone was willing to eat this PDA. Like the other fans, Zhong Zhenjin's eyes were filled with envy and her heart was filled with joy. She couldn't help but cross her hands and hold them in front of her, shouting, I can't take it anymore." Murphy also sang, "A Little Tempted." Then Yang Yi raised the microphone and sang with her. "It's hard to resist. Oh, the most frightening thing is to fall in love. Although you don't want to see or listen, you still fall in love." This section was originally sung with deep affection. Zhong Zhenjin's sharp eyes saw Murphy reach out her hand and Yang Yi hold her hand at the right time. Actually, love is also very beautiful. At this moment, Zhong Zhenjin absent-mindedly understood the meaning of the song, and also absent-mindedly felt the a little bit tempting written in the song. "I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore." Zhong Zhenjin felt hot all over. She pouted and twisted in her seat. Then she leaned over to Chu Fangfang's ear and shouted, "I can't take it anymore. I've decided to die single. I want to find a boyfriend. I don't believe that I, Zhong Zhenjin, can't meet a good man." Chapter 1092. His daughter's identity being exposed was a big deal. Lance Haokai rushed back to Jiangqing from Jinling on Sunday. Of course, he did not blame Yang Yi for this. After all, this was something he had expected. Wasn't it normal to be photographed by the media when interacting with a big star like Yang Yi often? He had only come back to Jiangqing to find Yang Yi's professional public relations team to help deal with this matter. My suggestion is that we don't need to hold an additional press conference. The more serious you are, the more willing the media will be to report. Mo Xiaowan received Lance Haokai in the company and said, "On the other hand, if we pretend to be deaf and mute and don't respond, we can turn this into a small matter and a small matter into nothing." Lance Haokai nodded and said, "That's the effect I want too. Try to minimize the impact. What I said before was just a general approach. As for some inappropriate news between you and Yang Yi, we will also contact the relevant media to delete the posts." Mo Xiaowan said, "However, because this news has caused quite a stir, we need some time to deal with it." Lance Haokai waved his hand casually. "I'll leave this matter to you guys. I'm not worried. The sooner the better." Mo Xiaowan smiled and said, "It's actually easier on your side. Basically, in a few weeks the news will be over. In the future, it will be very difficult for online users to search for your daughter's information and photos. It's not just micro-broadcasting. Actually, quite a few internet companies have this kind of service in a more discreet manner. It's just that the price may be slightly more expensive." However, the price was not worth mentioning for Yang Yi and Lance Haokai. Lance Haokai returned to Jiangqing and took a weekend off. Unfortunately, although the weather was hot, his little jacket was still eating and drinking well in Rome City. And she was really eating and drinking well. "Daddy, look, we ordered a lot of food." In the afternoon, in the video call with Lan Xian on WeChat, Lan Xian held up Yang Yi's phone proudly. She skillfully turned the camera to show Boss Lan their hot pot tabletop. There was a very large round table with a lot of fresh meat placed on it. What was even more enticing was that there was a quaint-looking big iron pot in the middle of the table. Of course, with Lan Xian's height, she couldn't take a picture of the inside of the hot pot. Haha, is that so? Did your Papa Yang take you to eat hot pot? Lan Xiaokai chuckled. Chengdu hot pot is very famous. Before he could finish, Lan Xian couldn't wait to tell him what was on the plates. Dad, do you see this? This is meat, a lot of fat cattle. A big plate. Lan Xian happily took a picture of the big plate of snowy fat cattle and showed it to Lan Xiaokai. Then she continued to introduce. This is tripe, this is fish, this is called. There was actually something that Lan Xian, who had eaten many delicacies, couldn't remember the name of. She still had a good memory. She remembered when the dishes were served just now. She came over and said excitedly to Lan Xiaokai on the phone. This is goose intestine. Yes. Lan Xian nodded quickly. Lan Xiaokai finally seized the opportunity to speak. He asked, Xian, let me tell you, Chengdu hot pot is very good, but it's very spicy. Can you eat it? Yes. Dad, let me tell you, I ate a lot of spicy beef yesterday. I might have eaten spicy food. Lan Xian turned the camera back to her and shone it on her adorable face. She beamed happily as she told her father about it. Really? You can eat spicy food? Lan Xiaokai was skeptical. At this moment, Xishi's little face squeezed into the camera. She and Lan Xian were looking at Lan Xiaokai on the screen. Hearing Lan Xiaokai's questioning tone, the little girl couldn't wait to clarify for Lan Xian. No, Xian can really eat spicy food. I can prove it. The little girl also raised her little arm, as if the camera could capture it. Xishi felt a little awkward saying this, so she reached out to grab the phone with Lan Xian and said, Papa Lan, let me tell you, yesterday, we went to eat tofu pudding. Tofu pudding isn't very delicious, but I really like eating baked egg cakes. I like it too. Lan Xian's eyes lit up and said, because there's meat in it, just like steamed buns. Steamed bun? QAQ were different. No, I want to talk about the beef tofu pudding. Fortunately, Xishi still remembered the topic she wanted to talk about. She shook her head and said, there's some beef in the beef tofu pudding, but it's spicy. I don't dare to eat it, but Xian ate it. Hehe. Lan Xian leaned against Xishi and twisted her shoulders, happily accepting Xishi's praise. Perhaps she felt that it was too strenuous to hold the phone, so she let go of her hand and let Xishi hold it. This was incredible. Xishi held the phone and wanted to express herself freely. This is a very special discovery. Xishi, why don't you dare to eat it? Lan Xiaokai's voice sounded. I ate it too, but it's a little spicy, so I didn't eat much. I also had some spicy twice-cooked pork for lunch, but it was delicious. Xishi held the phone and answered as she climbed onto the chair. Of course, the camera also shook. When Xishi was firmly kneeling on the chair, the little girl turned the camera around and filmed their hot pot for Lan Xiaokai to see. Papa Lan, look. Our hot pot is very magical. The middle is not spicy. In the camera, there was a big iron pot. There were many chili seeds, and green onions floating on the dark red bottom of the pot. The boiling chili oil gave people a feeling of violent spiciness. Interestingly, there was a small pot in the middle. It was probably only a little bigger than a palm. There was a non-spicy white soup boiling in it, and there were also green onions and mushrooms floating on it. This small pot was too much. Perhaps they wanted you to come to Chengdu to eat authentic spicy hot pot. At this moment, Murphy's voice came from the side. Xishi, don't film like that. Come down. What if you lose your balance and fall onto the table? Before Murphy could finish speaking, Yang Yi's large hands carried Xishi down from the chair. The little girl had almost pressed her body against the edge of the table just now. Be careful. If the phone falls into the soup, it will burn you. Yang Yi rubbed Xishi's little head and smiled. If you want to film this for Papa Lan to see, you can let me film it for you. Okay. Xishi nodded obediently, but she felt that there was still something she wanted to say. Papillon, let me tell you. We can eat spicy food and non-spicy food. Because she seemed to want to explain the principles of this hot pot to Lance Hao Kai. However, Lance Hao Kai didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw that she was holding the phone. In the shaky camera lens, Lan Xian had already thrown him, her father, to the side. She sat on the chair and excitedly asked Yang Yi to put some beef into her bag. Put it where it's hot. It'll be very fragrant. Lan Xian's high-spirited voice could be faintly heard. Lance Hao Kai sighed and shook his head. After patiently listening to Shishi's story, he let Shishi go to eat hot pot. Okay, when you come back, you can tell me what you did in Chengdu. Now go and eat, I'm starving. Ehe. Then I'll go eat hot pot. Shishi felt that she had said a lot, so she nodded in satisfaction. Lance Hao Kai didn't have his daughter to make noise, nor did he have his daughter to accompany him for lunch. This weekend was a bit boring. Honey, where's Xian Air's homework? Let me check it. I have nothing to do anyway. Lance Hao Kai put down the phone and said casually. Chapter 1093. On Monday, Yang Yi sent Shishi and Lan Xian to school. Not long after they came back, Lance Hao Kai came over with Wu Jingjing. Even Murphy could see the worry between their eyebrows. She quickly helped Yang Yi boil water and make tea. Brother Lan, what happened? Yang Yi frowned slightly and asked with concern. Lance Hao Kai's usual style of doing things was the same as his body shape. He was as steady as Mount Tai. Even if there were any small problems in business or at the amusement park construction site, he could calmly deal with it. He almost never complained to Yang Yi. Today's situation was indeed a bit abnormal. This matter is not a big deal, Lance Hao Kai said with a sigh. However, before he finished speaking, Wu Jingjing next to him discontentedly interrupted. Not a big deal? Shouldn't this kind of thing be taken seriously? I want to say later, it's not a big deal. Lance Hao Kai explained. What the hell happened? Yang Yi was getting more and more confused. Isn't it Xian Air? When I came back yesterday and saw her homework, I was almost dumbfounded. Lance Hao Kai said as he took out his large-screen phone and showed a photo to Yang Yi. Look at this diary she wrote and the teacher's comments. Lance Hao Kai didn't have it easy. He didn't think about how to deal with this matter, so he didn't talk about it. Last night when Lan Xian came back from Chengdu, he didn't mention a word. Now he was waiting for Lan Xian to go to school before he told Yang Yi about it. At first, Yang Yi thought that Lan Xian was lazy and didn't write in the diary or something else, but when he looked over, he couldn't help but be stunned. This morning, I was hungry and didn't have anything to eat. Shishi also didn't have anything to eat. Fortunately, I was smart. Haha, I secretly ate the biscuits that the class monitor bought for Xiaoya. Xiaoya doesn't eat biscuits, but I think it's delicious. The above was the entire content of the diary. Of course, it was mixed in with various pinyin. This was just the translated version. When he saw this, Yang Yi knew why Lance Hao Kai was worried. Petty thievery was not a good habit. Putting himself in Cece's shoes, Yang Yi felt that Lance Hao Kai would have been on the verge of breaking down when he read this diary yesterday. My God, you have billions of assets at home. You can have anything you want. You actually stole other people's biscuits because you were hungry? How could Lance Hao Kai's head not explode? How could Wu Jingjing not lose her temper just now? It was also because of Lance Hao Kai's calm personality that he didn't hang Lan Xian up and give her a beating when she came back last night. But then again, Lance Hao Kai was right. This wasn't a big deal. Because children would always make mistakes like this and that, they didn't form a correct worldview. They couldn't be defined because of one thing. Yang Yi glanced at the bottom of the diary. This diary was for the teacher to check. Sure enough, Li Ruolan also responded. She left a line of red words at the bottom. Next time, you can't eat other people's snacks. If you feel hungry, you can come to the teacher. The teacher brought an apple. I can give you half of it. A simple line of words immediately calmed Yang Yi's irritable thoughts. Li Ruolan obviously understood. She also knew that if this kind of thing was handled too harshly, it would bring a shame that the child would never forget for the rest of her life. Perhaps Lan Xian didn't feel anything now. If she grew up and became more sensible, She would remember that she was once called to the teacher's office and reprimanded in front of many people. She understood that she shouldn't secretly take other people's or little girls' snacks. She would probably carry a heavy psychological burden for the rest of her life. Fortunately, Teacher Lee didn't do that. I think her comments are very well written, and can also solve the problem. Yang Yi explained to Lan Caocai and Wu Jingjing. You see, on one hand, she told Lan Xian that she shouldn't do this. On the other hand, she also encouraged Lan Xian to go to her for help if she has such a problem. She didn't just say that Lan Xian can't do this when she's hungry. She also gave a solution to the problem, so that Lan Xian doesn't have to worry about being hungry. If she's hungry, we can ask her to bring something to school to eat. At the very least, she has pocket money in her bag. She can go to the school's canteen to buy food. Why would she want to take other students' biscuits? I really don't know what she's thinking, Wu Jingjing said as she slapped her thigh in annoyance. Sister Jing, don't be so angry. Let's think of a solution together. Murphy saw this and poured some hot tea for her. Drink some tea first and calm down. Let bygones be bygones. Didn't the teacher already help us deal with it very well? We don't need to pursue it too much. Actually, you see, Xian usually comes back well. This means that she has already accepted the teacher's guidance and won't do this in the future. Yang Yi laughed. Now that you're angry and anxious, it will make the child feel very scared. This will have a certain impact on her mental health development. That's true. I'm just worried that she thinks that the teacher doesn't take it seriously, and that we parents don't take it seriously. She's still carefree in her heart, and thinks that it's very smart to do this. What if she encounters a different situation next time? Is she thinking of using this method to solve it? Lan Caocai wasn't as anxious as Wu Jingjing, but he was also very worried. He slowly explained his worries to Yang Yi. Yang Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Lan Caocai's words made sense. Moreover, these words reminded him of a case in a children's education book that he had read before. Although it had been many years, Yang Yi still remembered it vividly. It was about a senior elementary school teacher who found out that student A stole student B's pocket money and spent it on buying hamsters. The process of investigating and interrogating student A was a battle of wits and courage. It was comparable to a criminal case. However, this teacher was very friendly. She didn't want to embarrass student A too much, so she privately gave student A the corresponding amount of money and asked him to secretly return it to student B. Then, student A wanted to use his own pocket money to return it to the teacher. Student A agreed. If this was the ending of the story, then everyone would be happy and satisfied. But later, when the teacher talked about this with student A's homeroom teacher, this teacher was only the homeroom teacher of this class, he was shocked to find out that student A had stolen other people's things more than once or twice. His class teacher had also told him many times and even helped him pay for it, but he didn't change. This kind of thing made the primary school teacher who told the story confused. She felt that she was really doing this for the good of the child, but by doing so, it could be said that she was helping him cover up his mistake. Perhaps he would feel more at ease and be more unrestrained. Lan Caocai's concern just happened to hit the nail on the head. Just as Yang Yi was deep in thought, Murphy also felt that this was a very big problem. She also advised, Yang Yi, help Brother Lan and Sister Jing think of a way to explain this to Xian. Although I think it's a small problem, isn't there an old saying? Small people steal needles, big people steal cows? We have to take this seriously. Yes, Xiaoyang, you're the best at teaching children. Help us think of a way. Wu Jingjing said. Lan Caocai also nodded. He and Wu Jingjing sat there, and a gloomy atmosphere filled the air. Yang Yi nodded gently. He continued to think for a while, then slowly said, I still feel that this matter needs to be solved from two angles. First, regarding the matter in Xian's diary. We'll follow the teacher's method and not mention it. We'll just let it go. Second, on the basis of not mentioning this matter, let me do it. I'll find Xian and Shishi and tell them a story. In the story, we'll teach them the principles of how to deal with people, okay? Don't give the children too much pressure. Lan Caocai and Wu Jingjing still trusted Yang Yi. After hearing what he said, They felt a lot more at ease and quickly nodded happily. Chapter 1094. In the afternoon, Yang Yi went to school to pick up Shishi and Lan Xian. He noticed that there were a few more reporters with cameras outside the school. It seemed that the exposure of Lan Xian's identity last weekend had some impact. However, Shishi and Lan Xian didn't seem to be affected. The two girls held hands as usual and ran out of the school gate happily. Then, they ran to Yang Yi's left and right hand, and under his protection, they crossed the road together. Shishi didn't feel any pressure at all. After getting in the car, she said to her father with joy, "Papa, the teacher knew that I went to see the panda today, and asked me to go on stage and tell everyone the story of the panda. But they didn't believe it. They said that the panda is so big. How could the baby panda be so small?" Lan Xian chimed in. "Yes, I forgot to bring the photos. I'll bring the photos to show them tomorrow," Shishi said regretfully. Yang Yi smiled and said, "Xian, didn't you go on stage and tell everyone the story? Only Shishi?" "That's right." Sisi nodded. Lan Xian also nodded for a while, then shook her head and said, "I don't want to tell a story. Shishi will do it." Yang Yi said with a smile as he drove, "That won't do. If you don't tell a story, we'll have a bonus event for the half-year anniversary of the opening of the gold coin shop tonight. How can you participate?" At this moment, Shishi and Lan Xian were both interested. The two girls pulled the seat belts in the back seat at the same time, stretched out their small arms, and hugged the front seat. They asked excitedly, "Really? A bonus event? What kind of prize? What kind of event is it? Is it fun?" Just like that, the two young ladies chattered and asked questions all the way. When they got home, Yang Yi wasn't in a hurry to organize the event. Instead, he urged them to do their homework. After dinner and walking back, Yang Yi called Shishi and Lan Xian to the side hall. Yang Yi had already told the two girls the rules of the event. If they told a good story based on the pictures, there would be a reward. The reward was very generous. It directly surpassed the limit of gold coins, and was a substantial reward. This made Shishi and Lan Xian very excited. If Xian tells a good story, then next month, when we go to Taiwan for a concert, I'll take you with me. There's a lot of delicious food there. Yang Yi smiled and said, "If Cece's lecture is good, then Daddy can take you to visit our doll factory and see how those super large dolls are made." Wow. Wow. Lan Xian and Shishi screamed excitedly. "I want a reward. I want to see the dolls. Papa, can I ask Sister Xiaowei, Fishy, Qiqi, Shiyun and Jiayi to come with us?" Shishi asked excitedly. Her mind was still very fast. She immediately thought of how to enjoy the reward later. "Shishi, can I go with you?" Lan Xian felt that the doll factory was also very interesting, so she said excitedly, "I can share some delicious food with you too if we go to Taiwan for a trip." "Okay." Shishi and Lan Xian laughed happily. However, Shishi still thought of the key point. The little girl said sadly, But I might win because I'm too good at telling stories. Xian, you won't be able to go to Taiwan to eat delicious food. What will you do then?" Lan Xian came back to her senses from her longing for the delicious food in Taiwan. In a trance, she realized that her beautiful idea was out of reach. Lan Xian pouted her small mouth and said unhappily, "Yes, if I can't go, Shishi, you can only play alone. How boring that is. No one will accompany you to eat delicious food." Yang Yi listened to the thoughts and logic of the two little girls floating around, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He clapped his hands gently to attract the attention of Shishi and Lan Xian. He said with a smile, "Don't think that you will lose. What you should think about now is that I have to work hard to tell this story well, and strive to get the prize. This prize is not for just one person. Xian, if you and Shishi can tell the story as well, then both of you will get the prize." At this time, Lan Xian and Shishi looked at each other happily. The two little girls were excited. After explaining the rules, Yang Yi projected two 4-panel comics that he had drawn himself on the large LCD TV, hanging on the wall of the side hall. Of course, the comics were drawn by him during the day. Although it was a little rushed, With Yang Yi's drawing skills, he could fully express the main storyline of the story. After all, Shi and Lan Xian were still young, and they couldn't write an 800-word essay just by looking at pictures. Having a clear storyline was more helpful for them. The first comic was about Su Heng not eating the ownerless pear. Of course, Su Heng didn't exist in this world, so Yang Yi drew this original story. The first panel was about Su Heng and his friend walking on the road. Su Heng's expression showed that he was tired and thirsty. The second panel was about Su Heng sitting under another tree, resting, and his friend climbing up the tree to pick pears to eat. The third panel was about his friend eating pears, and asking him why he didn't pick pears to eat. Su Heng's dialogue box said, "I can't pick pears, because this pear tree isn't mine." The fourth panel sublimated the theme again. It was about Su Heng's friend who was puzzled. "It's a time of war now. This pear tree doesn't have an owner. Why do you care?" Su Heng said, "The pear tree doesn't have an owner, but in my heart it has an owner. It isn't mine. Even if the fruit ripens and falls, I won't pick it up." The comic here was different from the original. Because it had been modified by Yang Yi, he couldn't make it too complicated in the comic. The key was to make it easy to understand. For the second comic, Yang Yi drew a completely different cartoon style. The first panel was about an old farmer who found that a lot of watermelons in his melon field had been ruined. He was biting a piece here and there, and the old man was wiping his tears sadly. The second panel was about the old man who decided to secretly hide in the haystack next to the melon field, waiting for a thief to steal his melon. Interestingly, this panel was divided into two parts. On the other side, a round figure appeared in the melon field in the middle of the night. The third panel was naturally about the old man turning on the lights and catching the thief. However, what surprised Shi and Lan Xian was that the round melon thief was actually a black and white panda with dark circles under his eyes. That's right, it was the panda they had just seen. In this panel, the panda was shedding tears of shame. Because it was a cartoon, he even said, "I'm sorry, old man. I know I was wrong. As long as you let me go, you can punish me however you want. You can twist my ears, hit my hands, or kick my butt." The fourth panel of the comic had the same ending. The old man magnanimously forgave the panda, and even picked a big and round watermelon for him to eat. The panda was very happy and said in return, "Old man, you're really a good person. I want to stay and watch over the melon field with you." The two comics each had their own emphasis. However, unsurprisingly, the second comic with the cartoon style and a little fairy tale flavor was favored by Shi and Lan Xian. Shi and Lan Xian both fought to tell the story of the second comic. Moreover, perhaps because the cartoon style and the panda attracted her attention, Lan Xian didn't think of the incident where she secretly ate the biscuits 2 weeks ago. Chapter 1095. Wow, my sisters are telling a story. Let's go and join in the fun. When Yang Yi was about to arrange who would tell the story for the two girls, Murphy's laughter was heard. He, Shi, and Lan Xian all turned their heads and saw Murphy walking towards them with a smile. She was even carrying a small stool that Tong Tong usually sat on. Tong Tong was already running in front of them excitedly. The little guy's steps were not big, but his pace was really fast. Like a small French sports car, he ran over with a whoosh. He ran to the middle of everyone and the screen before he stopped to look at his sisters. He opened his mouth and smiled, revealing a few white teeth. It was very cute. "Come, let's sit here and watch. We can't disturb my sisters." Murphy pulled Tong Tong and led him to sit on the side. Murphy knew that Yang Yi wanted to teach Lan Xian and Shi about values, so she also brought Tong Tong over. Although Tong Tong might not be able to understand, he might be influenced by him. Back on track, Yang Yi suggested, "How about this? Since you all like to tell the story of the second painting, let's play rock, paper, scissors. Whoever wins will tell the story of this painting. The loser can't be sad because the story of the first painting has a lot of room for improvement." This suggestion was quite fair. Shi and Lan Xian both agreed. After a round of rock, paper, scissors, Shi lost. She sighed regretfully and gave her seat to Lan Xian. Of course, although the little girl felt regretful, she didn't care too much. she said generously. Then Exionaire will tell the story of the giant panda. Lon Exion was full of joy, but when she stood in the middle and wanted to tell the story, she realized that she didn't seem to remember the story. She scratched her head and looked at Mr. Yang awkwardly. She said embarrassedly, "But I'm not ready yet." "Where's Shishi? Do you want to prepare for a while?" Yang Yi looked at Shishi and said with a smile, "Why don't you tell the story first?" Shishi's interest was immediately piqued. She didn't even think about preparing anything. She ran over happily. "Okay. I'll tell you a story. Little brother and mama are listening too. Give your sister a round of applause." Murphy held Tong Tong's hand and patted it with a smile. Shishi's storytelling ability had been honed over the years. Therefore, even though the little girl did not jump up and down in an ostentatious manner, her little face was brimming with a confident smile. As she had just returned from a walk, Shishi was a little sweaty. The sweat on her cheeks stuck to a few strands of her hair, making her look extraordinarily beautiful. The rarest thing was that her calm gaze and expression actually had some of the aura of Murphy on stage. It was a very, very long time ago. The little girl used the most common opening that her father used to tell her stories. She naturally cut into the story. A few people were taking a walk. Taking a walk? Yang Yi was stunned. How could it be a walk? However, he smiled and did not interrupt Shishi's free speech. But the sun was so hot. They wanted to rest for a while. Then they went to rest under the tree. Shishi pointed at the picture on the screen and spoke with assurance even though she did not have a rich vocabulary. Then one of them climbed the tree because there were fruits on it. "It's pear. It's snow pear. It's very sweet." Lon Exion recognized the words below and hurriedly reminded her little friend. Yes, it's snow pear. I want to eat snow pear." Shishi smiled and nodded to her little friend. Following that, Cece's story was basically about reading the dialogue. There were some words that she didn't know. The little girl even stopped and asked her father about it. The person sitting under the tree also said, "No, the pear tree belongs to someone else." "No," he said, that the pear tree does not have an owner, but in my heart, it belongs to someone else. As Shishi read, she scratched her head in confusion. She could not wrap her head around it. Yang Yi did not bat an eyelid. He waited for Shishi to finish the story. Then he smiled and pressed his hands together, indicating that Murphy and Lon Exion should not be in a hurry to applaud. He said, "Shishi, it's not over yet." "It's over. Is there more?" Shishi turned her head to look at the screen behind her, puzzled. Then she turned back to look at her father in confusion. "Do you remember when I tell you stories? When we tell a story, we don't just tell a story. At the end of the story, we also have to make a small summary. For example, what does this story tell us?" Yang Yi said with a smile. Shishi also remembered when her father reminded her. She suddenly understood and nodded. Then the little girl showed a sad expression. Her delicate eyebrows drooped, and her beautiful big eyes showed a trace of reluctance. She unwillingly crossed her two little hands in front of her body, twisted her waist, and begged, "Papa, then can I say more? I want a reward. I want to invite everyone to see the dolls." It turned out that Shishi thought a little too much. She thought that her father had already determined that she was not a good storyteller by pointing out the flaws in her storytelling. Yang Yi, who had never thought of that at all, couldn't help laughing. He organized his words and then said gently, "Of course you can. If you work hard to tell our story completely, it's also an improvement." Shishi's mood turned for the better, and she happily showed a sweet smile. "Then I'll say it. This story tells us that we can't pick the pear trees planted by others. If we want to eat them, we have to plant them ourselves. I can plant potatoes, and I can also plant very sweet pear trees." Shishi spoke more and more fluently, and her eyes were shining with excitement. She said, "Yes, we can't eat other people's pear trees, because they were planted by other people with painstaking efforts. I planted radishes, and one of them was spoiled by a bun. I feel terrible." Shishi's performance was really beyond Yang Yi's expectations. In fact, Yang Yi only hoped that Shishi could make a conclusion by herself. In this way, Shishi could have a deeper impression of the story and this principle. However, Yang Yi did not expect that Cece would be able to imagine what had happened to her in the past, and describe the feelings of a victim, by putting herself in his shoes. Very good. Yang Yi sincerely applauded Shishi, and he couldn't help but praise her. Shishi, I'm really happy for you because you can summarize so much. Look, your story is very complete, isn't it? Shishi received her father's praise, and also received applause from her mother, brother, and Lon Xian. She stood there a little embarrassedly, and then she giggled. Papa Yang, did Shishi tell a good story? Can we visit the doll factory now? Lon Xian asked curiously. That's right, this is the key. Shishi didn't care about being happy at this moment. She raised her little head and looked at her father anxiously. Her little face was a little tense, and she was very nervous as she waited for her father's decision. Of course, Shishi has already received her reward. Yang Yi looked at Lon Xian with a smile and said, Then now it's your turn, Xian. Whether or not you can go to Taiwan with us to eat delicious food depends on whether your story is good or not. After listening to the first half of the story, Shishi was just about to smile when Lon Xian interrupted her joy. Then I still have to prepare for a while. Shishi, come here. Let me tell you, you have to help me. The two little girls gathered together and started to whisper. Chapter 1096. What were they talking about? Actually, Yang Yi didn't even need to try his best to eavesdrop. He could tell from Lon Xian's anxious look that she was looking for Shishi for help. After all, Shishi was an expert when it came to storytelling. It was as if Lon Xian was also an expert when it came to talking about what was delicious. After a while, the two girls looked radiant. After Shishi finished her story, she turned around and ran upstairs. Lon Xian looked at the stairwell for a while, as if she was waiting for Shishi to come down. Tong Tong didn't have that much patience. He looked at her in confusion for a while, and thought that his sister had run out to play. He couldn't sit still on the stool, and wanted to stand up. Murphy pulled him back, but he still cried out unwillingly. Don't worry. Sister will be back soon. We still want to listen to Sister Xian's story. Murphy had no choice but to take the little boy back into her arms. Okay. Let's not wait for Shishi. I want to tell the story first. After a while, Lon Xian seemed to have seen something. She shouted and ran back to the middle of the side hall, looking as if she wanted to speak freely. Murphy was a little surprised. She asked, Why aren't you waiting for Shishi? Let Shishi watch you tell the story too. Lon Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. She stammered. Oh no, we can't wait for Shishi. We want to tell the story first. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Lon Xian with amusement. When Lon Xian ran back, Yang Yi clearly heard Shishi's footsteps coming down the stairs. Although Shishi deliberately slowed down her footsteps, the footsteps were relatively light. But who was Yang Yi? How could these footsteps be hidden from him? Alright Xian, tell us your story. We're all ready to listen to it. I believe that Shishi can also listen to your story. Yang Yi decided to help these two mysterious girls. However, his last sentence was meaningful. Lon Xian didn't get the hint, but Murphy had a sudden realization, and was trying hard not to laugh. Alright then, I'm going to tell you a story. Lon Xian nodded happily and said generously, There's a farmer uncle who grows a lot of watermelons. For some reason, Yang Yi heard Shishi pacing back and forth anxiously in the stairwell. Regardless of Shishi, Lon Xian was telling a story. Her storytelling style was relatively concise. There were no superfluous words, but her hands were gesturing. It was as if the little girl was also in the story. She gesticulated the round shape of the watermelon with her hands and feet. If it were Shishi, Shishi would probably use a lot of adjectives or details to describe it. However, Lon Xian was very straightforward and directly gesticulated. However, the effect was very good. Little Swan Tuan was very focused and did not struggle in his mother's arms. He was fully focused on Sister Lon Xian. Lon Xian seemed to have forgotten the words at the end. She was a little embarrassed and secretly glanced back at the TV screen. Then, she quickly turned back, as if she was worried that Mr. Yang would deduct points if he saw it. But the watermelon was eaten by a thief. The farmer uncle cried. Lon Exine said. Then the farmer uncle wanted to catch the thief. The thief is here. Her story was really very simple. Lon Exine was yelling and pointing while winking at Cece, who was in the stairwell, hinting for her to hurry up and come out. Yang Yi seemed to understand something. He looked expectantly. Sure enough, a little girl wearing panda pajamas and a hoodie with 2 round and black little ears jumped out of the stairwell. Seeing this, Yang Yi knew that his guess was right. Shishi really went upstairs to get panda pajamas. When they were at the panda base, Shishi and Lon Exine liked all kinds of panda souvenirs. In addition to the dolls, they also bought panda pajamas. However, it was a hot day now, so she couldn't wear these woolen pajamas. Yang Yi had already washed them for Cece and put them back into her wardrobe, but he didn't expect that the little girl would still find them. Of course, the panda pajamas still had some effect. Mo Fei was dazed for a moment, and then covered her mouth and laughed. Little Momo, on the other hand, widened his big eyes and waved his little arms as if he couldn't recognize his sister. After a while he took his mother's hand and muttered, "Sister. Meow meow." It wasn't just the people who reacted. The 3 fat British shorthairs who had been wagging their tails in boredom on the cat tree saw Shishi, the panda, jump out. They were also elves and raised their heads on the cat tree. However, after looking for a while, they felt bored and went back to squinting their eyes. It wasn't clear whether they were sleeping or secretly observing. Steamed Bun wagged his tail and ran over, circling around twice. So it was the panda who ate the watermelon. Lon Exine said angrily, pointing at Shishi with her hands on her hips. Cece, who was cooped up in her flannel pajamas, couldn't help but lift her hat at this moment. Her little face was drenched in sweat, and it was indeed very hot. However, this wasn't what Cece was anxious about. She took off her hat and pouted just to say the words that she had been holding back in the stairwell. "No, Exine Air, you haven't said anything yet. You have to turn on the light first to see that I'm a panda." Shishi said. Oh, yes, you have to turn on the light first. Lon Exine suddenly realized and quickly made a gesture to turn on the light. "There's more," Shishi said anxiously. "You have to say from the beginning a long time ago." It turned out that the little girl had been moving in the stairwell just now because of this. However, after saying it, Shishi felt much better. After all, she had to tell a story from a long time ago. Yang Yi looked at Shishi and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He couldn't help but whisper, "Shishi, don't interrupt Exine Air. It's impolite. You have to let her finish the story first." Being polite was one thing. In fact, Yang Yi felt a little sorry for his daughter. She had to finish the story quickly, and let Shishi take off her thick pajamas. Seeing her sweaty forehead, Yang Yi couldn't sit still. Then Lon Exine continued to tell the story. Of course, she didn't create many lines herself. She basically read the dialogue in the story. However, Lon Exine's performance and Shishi's cooperation made the story lively and interesting. Especially the scene where Shishi begged for mercy pitifully. The little girl bowed down and wriggled her little butt in the panda pajamas as she begged. "You can punish me in any way you want. You can twist my ears, slap my hands, or kick my butt." Seeing this scene, Murphy and Yang Yi both laughed. Tong Tong seemed to keep up with her mother's rhythm, and was beaming with joy. Finally, they finished the story. Yang Yi felt sorry for Shishi and asked her to take off her pajamas. In this weather, the air conditioner was on. Shishi was sweating profusely from the heat. She took off her pajamas, which were directly put on, and shouted, "Exine Air, hurry up. You haven't finished yet. You have to finish the story. Otherwise, my papa won't give you good grades." But what's the conclusion?" Lon Exine anxiously asked Shishi for help. She really couldn't make up anything to say. Yang Yi smiled. He had already prepared a speech. He said, "Exine Air, what do you think this story mainly explains?" Lon Exine blinked and said, "The panda damaged the farmer's watermelon." "Is this the right thing to do? You just said that the panda was the thief who stole the farmer's watermelon." Yang Yi laughed. "Of course it's wrong. How could it steal the farmer's watermelon?" Lon Exine said indignantly. "The farmer's watermelon was also very hard to grow. I've also grown vegetables, but it was very difficult to grow them. Perhaps it was because she had been inspired by Cece's previous conclusion, but Lan Xian also followed suit and analyzed the situation. This made Yang Yi a little surprised. He realized that his and teacher Li Ruolin's judgment might be right, because now it seemed that Lan Xian, this little girl, was quite righteous, and her previous behavior was just a small mistake that she didn't care about. That's right. Yang Yi smiled, clapped his fist and said encouragingly, so think about it in reverse. If the panda wants to eat watermelon, but it can't steal the farmer's watermelon, what should it do? If you can understand it, then you can tell us the truth of this story. Lan Xian was overjoyed. She giggled and rushed to say, I know. It's just that if a panda wants to eat a watermelon, it can't steal a farmer's watermelon. It should first ask the farmer, Uncle Farmer, I want to eat a watermelon. Can I have a watermelon? She was also on the side. She smiled and nodded her little head. Yes. Very good. In fact, if you can be better and tell the deeper meaning of these two stories, it would be even better. For example, these two stories tell us a very simple truth. We have to understand that what is ours and what is others. If it's ours, okay, no problem. It doesn't matter what you do with it. But if it's someone else's, such as the pear on the roadside or the farmer's watermelon, we try not to take it from others. But if we really want it, we have to take the initiative to ask others to see if they are willing to give it to us. This is a very basic etiquette and a moral code that must be followed. Yang Yi gestured to Xixi and Lan Xian with a thumbs up, and said with a smile, Of course. In fact, your performance tonight was very good. It exceeded my expectations. In the future, I can continue to practice your storytelling skills. These compliments made Xixi and Lan Xian very happy. However, Lan Xian was still a little nervous. She looked at Father Yang eagerly, her little feet twisting on the ground, waiting to hear the sentence that she had been looking forward to the most. Since the goal of today had been achieved, Yang Yi certainly had to satisfy her. That's right, Xixi and Xian both finished your stories very well tonight, so I think that you should both receive the rewards that I promised before. Before he finished speaking, Xixi and Lan Xian couldn't wait to cheer. Yay! That's great! Xian can also go to Taiwan to play. Hehehe. Lan Xian was also so happy that she didn't know what to say. She hugged Xixi and jumped up and down. Chapter 1097. Yang Yi hoped that the children could develop healthily and happily. Of course, for the worried Lans Hao Kai. After hearing Yang Yi's evaluation and confirmation, he was finally relieved. He handed over the family matters to Wu Jingjing and rushed back to Jinling City. There was a section of the project that was in the acceptance stage. There were some things that he needed to deal with personally. However, before Lans Hao Kai could go back, an uninvited guest came to Jinling City's Wu County on Tuesday morning. Hey, where are you from? This is a construction site. You can't just barge in. Hansen had just stepped into the construction site of the first phase of the theme park. He had not even taken 2 photos before he was discovered. I'm a reporter. I'm here to interview your boss, Lans Hao Kai, President Lan. Hansen was surrounded by a few construction workers who were wearing safety helmets. You're looking for President Lan? Go to Jiangqing to find him. He's a big boss. Do you think he'll eat, drink, and poop here like us workers? The workers looked at each other and laughed. Hansen was not a real paparazzi after all. He was more of a technical nerd. He was experienced in writing, but he was slow in speaking. He stuttered and could not find a suitable excuse. In the end, he was brought out of the construction site on the grounds of safety. Of course, it was not impossible to use the word chased away to describe it. After all, Hansen did not have the ability to resist. F*CKU. Hansen paced back and forth outside the construction site, and spat at the side angrily. However, he was still not satisfied. After thinking carefully for a while, Hansen finally had a new idea. Maybe it was because he had watched too many movies. Hansen went back to the city center of Wu County, and found a shop that sold old-fashioned military uniforms. He bought a set of military uniforms and green rubber shoes that were the same as the construction workers at the construction site. He even found another shop and bought a yellow helmet. It had to be said that Han Sen's imagination was also very big. After buying these military uniforms, he ruthlessly rolled on the sand a few times while wearing them. The originally clean military uniform suddenly became dirty. Of course, Han Sen went all out. He even got some potash and smeared it on his face. This time his face also darkened. Finally, in the afternoon, Han Sen used a disguise to sneak into the construction site. Everyone was busy working, and no one noticed a strange person sneaking in. Of course, Han Sen also walked along the edge. Gradually, he saw part of the completed project. F***CK. Han Sen couldn't help but exclaim softly. Whether it was the building of the frozen palace or the statue of the queen wielding ice magic, they were all extremely large in scale. Han Sen knew that this was a large-scale amusement park that Lanzhou Kai's company was building. This information was introduced in the news of Jinling City, but he didn't know that this large-scale amusement park actually made such a big scene. This should be the Palace of Frozen. Is it built on a 1-to-1 scale? Han Sen secretly used his clothes to cover his phone and took a few photos. He already knew a lot about Yang Yi. Moreover, it wasn't new news that the animated movie Frozen would be released during the summer vacation. They even made a poster for it. Moreover, Han Sen came to the construction site through the personal micro-broadcasting of some employees of Lanzhou Kai's company. He found out that this newly built large-scale amusement park of Lanzhou Kai's was related to Yang Yi's fairy tale works in terms of theme and content. This was not mentioned in the media reports. Of course, Han Sen didn't expect that Lanzhou Kai's side would make such a big deal. This frozen palace, without even approaching it, was extremely shocking just looking at it from afar. There's a lot of investment in this. I heard that it's divided into several phases, including an island. Han Sen took photos crazily while thinking secretly. No, it's not a lot, it should be a lot. Lanzhou Kai can't possibly sell all his liquid funds or his shares in the Sahara Desert just to make this amusement park, right? From the current relationship between Yang Yi and Lan, they should both have invested. If only Lan bought Yang Yi's copyright, the expenses would be even higher. Han Sen's mind was spinning quickly, and he quickly grasped the main point. Yang Yi is also a child lover. He usually takes his children with him when he goes out. It's not impossible for him to invest a little money to make an amusement park for his children. It should be that Lan wants to make an amusement park, and he bought the land. He told Yang Yi, and the two of them hit it off. Han Sen, who had made up the main text, basically guessed the ownership of the amusement park, but there was little information. He couldn't believe it. In fact, this amusement park was Yang Yi's idea, and Lanzhou Kai was only a shareholder and agent. Hey, what are you doing? You're not working, but wandering around here? Who's your foreman? Suddenly, there was a deep voice behind him, scaring Han Sen so much that he almost threw his phone away. I. Han Sen looked back and saw a construction worker, who was slightly better dressed and wearing a blue safety helmet, frowning and sizing him up. Han Sen suddenly became nervous. You're not from our construction site? The construction worker was responsible for directing the workers. He had worked with a lot of workers, so naturally, he could tell that something was wrong with Han Senator. He looked at him carefully, and finally, his eyes fell on Han Sen's white wrist, and his expression suddenly became serious. Half an hour later, Han Sen was kicked out again. Fortunately, Han Sen said that he was a resident nearby. The construction worker checked his belongings to make sure that he didn't steal the construction site's tools, didn't make things difficult for him, gave him a safety education, and told him not to come back again. Then they let him go. They didn't even give me back my hat. Han Sen spat again. After all, his safety helmet was too similar to the construction site's, so others thought it was a safety helmet. Fortunately, this wasn't a big loss. Han Sen's phone and the photos inside were all kept. After leaving the construction site, he returned to the small hotel in Wu County. After taking a shower and changing his clothes, Han Sen broke free from his bad mood. He looked excited and said to himself, it should be right. Yang Yi and Lanzhou Kai have a deep partnership. Besides, there are also related companies like the Sahara Publishing House. It can be seen that the relationship between Yang Yi and Fu Jun is earlier and deeper than that between Lance Haokai and Fu Jun. Hansen was talking to himself as he quickly typed a draft on his laptop. The title of the draft was Sahara, Backwave Super Amusement Park. Behind the scenes show you Yang Yi, who built a business empire silently. He had prepared enough materials over the past few days, and now he was using them all. This time, he wanted to let the whole country know that he, Hansen, was the man who was the best at digging for breaking news. Chapter 1098. At the beginning of the month, Sahara Online Mall acquired eBay and set up a new sub-brand, Sahara Taba Online Mall. In just a month, Sahara Online Mall could be said to have expanded frequently. It was constantly recruiting and expanding its own staff. Similarly, Sahara Express was further expanding. Fu Jun gave Li Long a large number of slots to set up his own data processing team and strive to build an open logistics big data platform this year. Just like the rookie logistics in Yang Yi's previous life, using advanced big data processing technology to integrate logistics resources from different platforms to give users of Sahara Online Mall the best logistics experience. After all, after the Sahara Taba Online Mall was opened, Sahara Group could no longer maintain its monopoly on logistics. They had to bring in more logistics companies to serve the many Taba merchants. However, this did not matter. At present, Sahara Express was at the leading level in the industry. Li Long could proudly claim that no one could provide the same quality express delivery service as Sahara Express. However, by bringing in competitors, it would help stimulate Sahara Express to continue to improve and develop. What he wanted to talk about here was an old acquaintance, Mu Yuqing, Yang Yi's die-hard fan. Under such circumstances, Li Long asked the headhunting company to poach him to the Sahara Express with a high salary. In the previous company, Mu Yuqing was doing very well and did not have any conflicts with the boss. However, he had been a manager for a few years and had limited room for development. People in the IT industry also needed to jump up often in order to easily increase their value. Mu Yuqing used to be a loyal user of Sahara Online Mall. From the beginning, he was very interested in the operation model of Sahara Online Mall. Although Sahara Online Mall was not the one who poached him, it was the industry's big shot, Li Long, who wanted him. Mu Yuqing took advantage of the situation and jumped to Sahara Express with a high annual salary contract. He came to Sahara Express as the product director of a new product, Sahara Logistics Network. Although this was only a new project, as the product director, Mu Yuqing could be said to be an executive of Sahara Express. He was on the same level as the other department heads, or maybe even a level higher, depending on the future results of the product. This morning, after Mu Yuqing finished a meeting with a few product managers, he was busy holding his laptop and preparing to go to the technical team to take a look. Because it was a brand new product and a brand new logistics network platform, the burden on Mu Yuqing's shoulders was very heavy. Especially in the past few months, the first step had been difficult. He and the team had been very busy. However, at this moment, a female product manager who had also jumped over from somewhere else came over with a smile and said, "Mr. Mu, let me ask you a very gossipy question." Mu Yuqing responded in surprise. His heart, which was already in his 30s, still skipped a beat. "Is there really Yang Yi among the bosses of our company?" The girl revealed a familiar fangirl expression and asked with a grin, "Do you know who Yang Yi is? That man who's good at writing songs is Murphy's husband." Yang Yi? Mu Yuqing knew it too well. Before Yang Yi became famous, Mu Yuqing, who was also known as Mu Yuchen, had already become a hardcore fan of Yang Yi. At that time, this girl probably didn't even know who Yang Yi was. Mu Yuqing snorted in his heart, but he quickly reacted. "Ah, Yang Yi? Yang Yi is one of the bosses of our company?" Mu Yuqing asked in surprise. "Where did you find out about this?" The girl blinked and said, "On the internet. This morning, the news was all over the place." Mu Yuqing thought about it. He seemed to have been too focused on work these days. He really didn't have time to look at his phone. As he thought about it, he put on a straight face, coughed, and said, "Don't talk about this groundless news in the company. Be careful that Mr. Lee hears about it and deducts your bonus. The girl stuck out her tongue in embarrassment and ran away with her tail between her legs. She actually knew that Mu Yuqing was deliberately putting on a straight face to maintain his position as a director. Usually Mr. Mu was very good. Usually when there was something, he would take care of it. He rarely let the rest of the team bear the pressure of the outside world. However, after the girl ran away, Mu Yuqing's curiosity rose. When did Yang Yi become my boss? Mu Yuqing couldn't hold back his curiosity. He went back to the office and looked up the news on the computer. It really was. The internet was full of reposts and reports of Han Sen's exposé, Sahara, Backwave, Super Amusement Park. Behind the scenes, restored to you Yang Yi, who built a business empire silently. The article was very long. Han Sen even inserted a lot of photo evidence in it. However, Mu Yuqing saw the photos of Sahara Publishing House in Jiangcheng that Han Sen gave him, as well as the Children's Book Author Support Fund department that was funded by Yang Yi. Mu Yuqing was already 80% impressed by this exposé. One had to know that Mu Yuqing was Yang Yi's hardcore fan. Although Yang Yi first made a name for himself on Yuan Literature website, Yang Yi's later books were all published through Sahara Publishing House. Mu Yuqing knew the trajectory of this change very well. Back then, this group of fans was worried that Yang Yi would fall out with Yuan Literature website and affect the publication of his works. Mu Yuqing also remembered that the first time he came into contact with Sahara Online Mall was also because of Yang Yi's books. At that time, several of Yang Yi's physical books were sold on Sahara Online Mall. That made him realize the existence of this online mall earlier than others. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't help but pat his head. Old Mu, you're too stupid. How could you not think of this Sahara and that Sahara are related? Mu Yuqing sighed. However, it was also very normal. Yang Yi was just a small author and a small celebrity at that time. Who would have thought that he was related to Sahara Online Mall with a market value of tens of billions? Even if such a thought had briefly occurred to Mu Yuqing, he would probably have scoffed and laughed at himself for being too whimsical. But now, it seemed that the ownership of Sahara Publishing House was in the hands of Yang Yi. Back then, Sahara Online Mall was also started by Fu Jun from a small publishing house. This was already the company's chronicle that Mu Yuqing knew by heart. Why would Fu Jun give the publishing house to Yang Yi? Obviously, Yang Yi knew Fu Jun earlier than Lance Hao Kai. Han Sen also made the same speculation in the exposé given by Entertainment Express. However, as an old reader, Mu Yuqing went one step further than the speculation. He could be sure that Yang Yi knew Fu Jun in the early days of Sahara Online Mall, or even earlier. Mu Yuqing couldn't help but have goosebumps when he thought about how the Sahara Online Mall had given Yang Yi's works so many resources to promote them. He was so excited that he felt that he was closer to the truth than Han Sen. Because of Han Sen's exposé, Mu Yuqing found that there was still a problem with the logic of the reasoning after reading it. After all, the information that Han Sen could collect was limited. Yang Yi was the boss of Sahara Publishing House plus Yang Yi had a good relationship with Lance Hao Kai. They also had a cooperative relationship with the amusement park plus Yang Yi's good friend Guizi served as the image ambassador of the Sahara Rural Development Charity Foundation. These three pieces of evidence could not conclusively prove that Yang Yi was the boss of Sahara Online Mall. This was because there was another possibility. Because of the book publishing cooperation, Yang Yi was Fu Jun's friend. At the same time, Yang Yi was also Lance Hao Kai's friend. When Fu Jun was short of money, he helped Fu Jun contact Lance Hao Kai to invest in Sahara Online Mall. This also prevented the erosion of some man-eating venture capitalists. Later, Fu Jun became rich. In order to thank Yang Yi, he gave the publishing house, which was no longer so important, to Yang Yi. Obviously, in this exposé, Han Sen deliberately did not mention this possibility. He used clever writing to deliberately lead readers to think in that direction. However, for some smart people, they could still see the logic loophole. But the conclusion of this report should be a little possible. Mu Yuqing checked the time of the two financing of Sahara Online Mall online, as well as the establishment and development of Yang Yi's Backwave Technology Company. Sure enough, Mu Yuqing found that during the financing period of Sahara Online Mall, Yang Yi's net worth was more than a few hundred million. In other words, if Fu Jun needed money and Yang Yi did not have shares in Sahara Online Mall, Yang Yi did not need to look for Lan Cao Kai at all. He could invest for Fu Jun himself. Of course, the logic here also had the possibility that Yang Yi was short-sighted and let go of this opportunity. However, Yang Yi, who could create micro-broadcasting in WeChat, could not see the potential of Sahara Online Mall. Ever since Mu Yuqing found out that Yang Yi was the big boss of Backwave, he admired Yang Yi. Now he was like a fangirl, firmly believing that Yang Yi must have seen the potential of Sahara Online Mall, and got involved early on. Of course, it was useless for him to let his imagination run wild and read the newspapers. He was a senior executive of Sahara Express. He did not know about this, but President Li Long, who had already received equity rewards from the company, did not have the authority to know about this matter? No, I have to ask President Li about it. Mu Yuqing could not calm down. He pushed open the office door excitedly and walked to the floor where Li Long was. The excited Mu Yuqing seemed to have forgotten that he had just scolded the product manager girl with a straight face and told others not to gossip. However, he himself couldn't suppress the fire of gossip that was growing in his heart. Chapter 1099. Yang Yi immediately knew that he was exposed by the Han Sun Entertainment Express again. However, what was interesting was that even though the media reposted and discussed the news, the impact on the public was not as big as when the ownership of Backwave shares was exposed. Maybe it was because everyone was already used to it. This was very similar to the following scenarios. If a celebrity was suddenly exposed to have a lot of shares in a technology company, the media would report about it every day, bragging about how good she was at making money and how she was the best investor among the celebrities. Her fans would also follow suit and exclaim. But even in the technology world, the news of a certain technology company in Yang Yi's previous life, controlling 5% of Ubisoft's shares, didn't cause a ripple in the slightest. In the eyes of ordinary people, they might have only glanced at this headline and said, "Oh," before skipping over it. It was very difficult to attract their attention. The logic was the same. Even though Yang Yi's name still attracted some attention, in the eyes of the public, Yang Yi's ownership of shares in an internet company was nothing special. He was already worth billions. What was the difference if he had a few billion more? As a result, the media was in a frenzy, while the public was in a state of disinterest. After Yang Yi received the analysis report from the company's public relations department, he quickly called Fu Jun to discuss with him. They agreed that both sides would remain silent. No response, no denial, no matter how the media reported, speculated, or excited. That was their own business. The competition in the entertainment industry was very fierce in this world. Ordinary celebrities did not accept interviews or contact the media because they were cutting off their own path of retreat. However, Yang Yi and Murphy were different. They did not have to worry about the media's retaliation. This time, Yang Yi was very familiar with the situation. He bumped into Murphy, who was at the company with her. He swapped his car with Xiao Ai's car for the time being. He drove Xiao Ai's red sedan, and took a detour with Murphy to go home, just in time to avoid the media's encirclement. Of course, this happened in the morning. In the afternoon, Yang Yi received a call from Fu Jun, but this time, it was a WeChat video chat. Didn't he just call this morning? Yang Yi thought that something had happened and quickly connected the video chat. However, before Yang Yi could speak, Fu Jun burst out laughing. "Old Fu, what's the matter? Why are you so happy?" Yang Yi smiled. "It's quite a coincidence. Xiaoyang, wait a moment, I'll show you someone. Do you still remember?" Fu Jun said with a smile. He turned the camera of his phone and took a picture of Li Long and Mu Yuqing, who were sitting opposite his desk. Mu Yuqing was a little reserved. Although there was a smile on his face, he still looked a little nervous and perturbed. Mu Yuqing had only asked Li Long about the actual situation in the morning. Li Long had poached him from his previous company and had a good relationship with him. Hence, the two of them were still chatting and laughing when they talked about this matter. Moreover, because Mu Yuqing was also a senior in the company and had the authority, Li Long gave him an affirmative answer. After that, When he left Li Long's office, Li Long only asked him to keep it a secret. However, Mu Yuqing didn't expect that in the afternoon. When Fu Jun made time to call a few people in charge of the company to come over for a meeting to discuss the strategy to deal with this matter, Li Long told Fu Jun about this interesting coincidence with a smile. This wasn't a big deal. Fu Jun thought it was a little interesting, so he asked Li Long to call Mu Yuqing over. Moreover, after he saw the photo of Mu Yuqing eating with Yang Yi after the signing event, he happily said that he wanted to call Yang Yi and tell him about this coincidence. Fu Jun and Li Long, the two bosses, obviously didn't think much of it. It was just that Mu Yuqing had to suffer. When he faced Fu Jun, the big boss, he trembled in fear, afraid that he would say something wrong. Fortunately, Yang Yi had a good memory. After he saw Mu Yuqing's appearance in the camera, he felt that he looked familiar. After carefully searching in his mind, he had an answer. How can I not remember? Mu Yuqing, Mu Yuqing. Yang Yi said with a smile. 2 years ago, I went to Yangcheng for a signing event, and even treated you to a meal. Among my fans in Yangcheng, you're the most influential one. Boss Yang, you still remember me? Mu Yuqing heard this and asked in surprise. Mu Yuqing didn't think that after 2 years, Yang Yi would still be able to call out his name. At this moment, his excitement instantly overshadowed his uneasiness in Fu Jun's office. Fu Jun turned the camera over and pointed the phone screen at Yang Yi. This way Mu Yuqing could also see Yang Yi's appearance. Yang Yi on the phone screen smiled and said, "Of course you're my parents. I'm grateful, how could I forget?" Boss Yang, no Boss Yang, you're too polite. Right now you Boss Fu and Boss Li are my parents. Mu Yuqing recovered from his excitement and said happily and nervously. Fu Jun laughed and put the phone in front of him. He said, "You guys should just call each other your own names. Xiao Yang doesn't like people calling him boss. I think you'll feel uncomfortable calling him that." "Yes, don't call me Boss Yang." "Oh right, old Fu, what's Mu Yuqing doing in Sahara Desert?" Yang Yi asked curiously. "I remember that 2 years ago when I had dinner with him, he was still the project manager of that messaging technology company." "That's right, Li Long poached him to Sahara Express. He's now in charge of the logistics network." Fu Jun said. Li Long added, "The position of product director." Yang Yi nodded lightly. He told Fu Jun and Li Long to start the logistics network, but he didn't expect Mu Yuqing to be in charge. "Mu Yuqing, I'll call you old Mu like on the forum." Yang Yi asked Fu Jun to look at Mu Yuqing and said with a smile, "The project you're in charge of now is actually quite important. It's related to the important development of the company's logistics in the future. Do it well. If you have any problems, look for Li Long. He's definitely an expert in logistics." Mu Yuqing nodded gratefully. Although after saying this, Yang Yi returned to his original calmness and treated Mu Yuqing as the fan who gave him a lot of support in the past. Both Yang Yi and Mu Yuqing knew that with this relationship, they couldn't go back to the past. Even though Mu Yuqing also took the opportunity to ask Yang Yi a very fanboy question. "Dada Yang, I really want to ask. You haven't released many books in the past 2 years, but you've released many songs. We fans are all looking forward to it. We want to know when your new book will be released." Yang Yi had indeed reduced the speed of releasing books. After all, he didn't need to rely on writing books to earn money now. He would only occasionally release a book if he was particularly interested in it. Of course, compared to many authors, his speed wasn't considered slow. However, compared to the diligent Yang Yi in the past, the current Yang Yi had indeed disappointed his fans. Yang Yi often taught Shishi to know how to be grateful. He had also learned this principle himself. His fans had supported him during his most difficult times. Yang Yi didn't want to see their disappointed eyes. Therefore, after hearing Mu Yuqing's question, Yang Yi thought for a while. Fu Jun teased him. "Why are you still releasing books when you're so rich?" He said to Mu Yuqing, "In the second half of the year, you'll be able to see my new book in the second half of the year." This was just a small episode. When his identity was exposed, it stirred up waves in Yang Yi's heart. It was not as big as when Shishi suddenly knocked on the glass door of his bathroom at night. The little girl had already taken a bath before. Before Yang Yi took a bath in Murphy's bedroom, he deliberately went to check on her. He saw that she was still playing in the master bedroom obediently. But just when Yang Yi was trying his best to persuade Mo Fei to put little Momo in the crib, and he took Mo Fei to enjoy the experience of taking a bath in the luxurious bathtub, the little girl suddenly ran out of her bedroom excitedly, banged on the glass door of the bathroom, and shouted, "Papa, Papa, I have good news for you." Chapter 1100. The red rose petals, the illumination of the candles, the swaying red wine glass, and the lips that seemed to be stained with blood. Such an unusual beauty. How could it be missing the charming supercilious eyes of his beloved princess consort? Of course, if she didn't run over and bang on the bathroom door, all of this would be perfect. Yang Yi finally convinced Murphy to take advantage of the fact that the two children weren't paying attention to secretly be romantic and spend some alone time. However, before they finished taking off their clothes, they were interrupted. "Wait, don't rush." Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Murphy and mouthed to her, She will leave soon." Murphy rolled her eyes at Yang Yi coquettishly. She didn't dare to make a big fuss and just buttoned up her cotton pajamas that had been unbuttoned by Yang Yi to her delicate navel. With her daughter outside, how could the thin-skinned Murphy have the nerve to maintain that state just now? Yang Yi was a little anxious, but at this time he couldn't care less. He could only turn his head and ask, "Ahem, Shishi, what good news do you want to tell Dad?" That's right, hee. I called Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha told me that she's going to come to our place to play during the summer vacation. Papa, I miss Lu Weisha so much. I'm so happy." Outside the door, Shishi was still beaming with joy and said happily, "Oh, Lu Weisha will come to China to play this summer? That's good. But didn't you plan to go to Lu Weisha's house to play during the summer vacation?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. Why did Yang Yi ask this? Because Shishi had already told him about this idea. Moreover, in order to make her father agree to let her go to Sweden to play with Lu Weisha, the little girl had been working hard this semester to save up gold coins. Yang Yi found it very interesting that Shishi would take out her small wooden box every night before going to bed and carefully count the gold coins she had saved. She calculated how many gold coins she had left to exchange for the 50 gold coins that she could use to travel abroad. It had to be said that in order to save gold coins, Shishi would work hard to help her parents with the housework when she was free. Unless she particularly liked a doll, she rarely took the initiative to buy it. Of course, she already had a lot of dolls. After a few months, the little girl had actually saved up close to 40 gold coins. She was about to reach her goal. "Yes, I also want to go to Lu Weisha's house to play. But Lu Weisha is coming to our house to play." Outside the door, Shishi giggled and said, "Then Papa, let me tell you, Lu Weisha said that it would be fun to go to their house in winter, because there will be beautiful snow and beautiful auroras." The concept of auroras was mentioned by Yang Yi when he told Shishi about Lu Weisha's hometown. When they were chatting, Lu Weisha also showed Shishi photos of auroras. "Well, let's wait until winter to go to Lu Weisha's house to play." Yang Yi looked at Murphy's pretty face, which was as red as the neon at night, and was somewhat absent-minded. "Papa, can I ask you for one more thing?" Shishi pressed her two small hands on the bathroom door again, and said seriously, "Well, tell me what it is first." Yang Yi smiled helplessly at Murphy, and then said to Shishi, That's right. Can we visit the doll factory later?" The little girl's voice came in, and it was muffled, as if she had stuck her little head on the bathroom door. "Because I want Lu Weisha to go with us. Lu Weisha has never seen the doll factory, but she said that there is a chocolate factory there." As she spoke, the little girl became excited again, and couldn't wait to describe what a chocolate factory was to her father. "Ahem, Shishi, you can visit the doll factory at any time. You can discuss it with Lu Weisha, choose a time, and then tell Dad." Yang Yi had no choice but to interrupt the little girl, and softly advised, "Go and tell Lu Weisha this good news. Dad also wants to take a bath." Shishi was a little regretful, but she thought of telling Lu Weisha this super good news, and let Lu Weisha feel that her house was very fun. The little girl became happy again, and she readily responded, Yes. Papa, then I'll go and tell Lu Weisha." Hearing Shishi's happy laughter leave the bathroom door, Yang Yi was a little relieved, and he was about to continue to drag Murphy into the water. But at this time, Shishi's puzzled voice came from the bedroom. Hey, where is Mom? Why is Mom missing? Suddenly, Yang Yi and Murphy froze. Then Shishi asked Tong Tong, Brother, where is Mom? Why are you playing by yourself? Mum. Tong Tong also giggled, and no one knew what he was happy about, so he shouted something that no one could hear clearly. Mama is here. Murphy finally couldn't help it, and she blushed and pulled away Yang Yi's mischievous hand, opened the bathroom door and walked out. After closing the door, Yang Yi, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, could still hear Shishi's surprised voice. Hey Mom, why are you in Papa's bathroom? The little girl didn't have any special doubts, and she felt that it was like watching a magic show, and it was very interesting to see a living person appear. Ahem, Mama's tidying up the clothes that you and Brother changed out of. Murphy tried to cover it up. In any case, tonight's plan of taking a bath together was ruined, and Yang Yi was a little depressed, so he could only take a bath by himself. Lu Weisha was coming to China with her father to play with her old kindergarten friends. When Shishi brought the news to the school, Yang Luoqi, Chen Shiyin, Nan Jiayu, and the others immediately cheered happily. Lan Xian was fine, as she already knew the news. Lu Xiaoyu, on the other hand, was very curious when she saw their big reactions. Shishi, is Lu Weisha really a foreigner? Lu Xiaoyu asked curiously when she returned to the classroom with Shishi. Yes. She is Swedish and she is very tall. Shishi giggled. Taller than you? Lu Xiaoyu asked with some surprise. She felt that Shishi was already very tall, and not only was she taller than girls of the same age, but now Shishi was almost the same height as Yu Xiaowei, who was 2 years older than her. Yes. But Lu Weisha is 1 year older than me. Shishi cracked her fingers and said with some nostalgia, but we haven't played with her for a long time, and we used to be very close. Shishi, how did you talk to Lu Weisha? Do foreigners all speak English? Lu Xiaoyu was still following her own path, asking the things that she was very curious about. I spoke Swedish to Lu Weisha. My papa taught me, and now I speak it very well. Then Lu Weisha also spoke a little Chinese, but after she returned to Sweden, she couldn't speak it very well. Shishi explained with some regret. Speak Swedish? That's amazing. Lu Xiaoyu looked at her desk mate with admiration. Chapter 1101. The light shadow's footsteps were hurried. Unknowingly, it was already the end of May. After entering summer, the weather in Jiangqing became more and more stuffy, especially since there was no rain for the past few days. During the day, the sun was scorching the land and the campus was also filled with heat waves. It was so hot that it made people panic. Today we won't play basketball outside because the weather is very hot. It's not good to get heat stroke. The tall and burly teacher, Lu Dashan, was in the school's gymnasium, talking to the children of the first grade, class 3, who were laughing and joking as they lined up. Quiet, don't make any noise. Chao Roland, who was shouldering a heavy responsibility, had no choice but to stand up and shout loudly. In contrast, the physical education representative was much more dull. Not only did he not want to help maintain order, but he also stood there and laughed happily, as if he had forgotten his duty. Well, everyone, please be quiet. Listen to the teacher. We won't play basketball outside today, but come to this comfortable gymnasium. What do you think the teacher is going to teach you today? Lu Dashan smiled and kept them guessing. This time, it was the teacher's turn to ask questions. Shishi, who loved physical education, was especially excited. Her eyes lit up as she tried to raise her arms and said in her sweet voice, I know. We're not playing basketball outside, but in the gym. Not basketball. Lu Dashan scratched his head awkwardly and said, the basketball court for today's class is reserved for the teachers of grade 2 and grade 5. Today we are going to learn to play table tennis. Today was not the PE class on Tuesday, so Shishi's PE class was not at the same time as Yu Xiaowei's. Ping pong? Ping pong. The reactions of the little guys were different. Among them, some had learned to play table tennis, or had watched others play table tennis on TV, and some were ignorant and had no concept of table tennis. Typical examples were Xi and Du Yuqian. Du Yuqian might have seen others play table tennis, but she stood in the front row of Xi, looking confused, as if she couldn't understand what table tennis meant. Xi's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands happily, then turned to Lu Xiaoyu and said, "Xiaoyu, we want to play table tennis. I also have a table tennis racket at home. My papa bought it last year." Lu Xiaoyu was also beaming with joy. She smiled excitedly and said, "I also know how to play table tennis, because my father and mother both know how to play table tennis. They taught me, and then my father participated in their unit's competition and won the first prize." "Win an award? That was too amazing." Xi looked at Lu Xiaoyu in surprise and said enviously, "Wow, little you, is your papa so powerful?" "Actually, I haven't learned how to play table tennis yet because I haven't played table tennis with papa yet." "It's okay, I can teach you," Lu Xiaoyu said excitedly. "You can also come to my house. I'll take you to the table tennis place. There are table tennis tables in our community." There was no need for Lu Xiaoyu to teach. After Lu Dashan finished his lecture, he asked the PE representative and two enthusiastic boys to bring back the table tennis racket and table tennis racket. Then he began to explain the boring table tennis game. Xi listened carefully. After all, she had only seen table tennis, but had never really played it. After the table tennis racket was opened at home, she didn't know where it was put by her father. After all, there was no table tennis table at home. At most, Xi and Tong Tong would play basketball at most. After the Chinese class, which was probably taught by the PE teacher Lu Dashan, the children ran out of their lines and happily grabbed the table tennis racket and table tennis racket. "Don't worry, there are enough table tennis racket, but not enough table tennis racket. But you can play with 4, 5 or 6 people on a table. One ball is enough," Lu Dashan said helplessly behind them. But the children were noisy, laughing, and shouting, which almost overturned the gymnasium. Lu Dashan didn't know how many children could listen to his words. "Xian Xiaoyu and you and Qianqian will play together, okay?" After getting the table tennis racket, Xi paid attention to the teacher's words. After hearing it, she immediately organized. Liao Qianqian was Lan Xian's deskmate, and she had a good relationship with Xi. So there were 4 people. Although they were slower than those boys, who were faster than them, the 4 girls gathered around a table tennis table, looking very excited. "I don't know how to play table tennis. This ball is for who knows how to play. Open it for you." Lan Xian held a yellow table tennis ball in her hand, but after thinking for a while, she spread out her hand and stretched it out. "Give it to Xiaoyu. She knows how to play table tennis." Xi immediately pointed to Lu Xiaoyu and said, "Then you can have it." Lan Xian threw it over generously. It was a high toss, but Lan Xin misjudged the resistance of the ball in the air. The ping-pong ball fell down early in the air, crossed the net in the middle, and bounced repeatedly on the ping-pong table with a piak-piak sound. However, this scene was very interesting in the eyes of Xi and the other girls. Although the table tennis ball was bouncing lower and lower, the 4 girls' heads followed the arc of the table tennis ball, up and down, like chickens pecking at rice. In the end, Xi, who was tall and strong, quickly reached out to grab the table tennis ball, and handed it to Lu Xiaoyu. She smiled and said, "He. You didn't throw it over." Lu Xiaoyu kicked off the table, but to everyone's surprise, it was her first time kicking off, and she didn't play well. The table tennis ball got stuck on the net and bounced back. I'll pick it up. Lu Xiaoyu shouted in embarrassment, and took a big step forward. Ha. Lu Xiaoyu's mistake made the other girls laugh. However, they seemed to have forgotten that they were the real novices. Sure enough, the next time Lu Xiaoyu hit the table tennis ball, Lan Xian and Liao Qianqian waved the table tennis racket in a flurry. As a result, neither of them was able to catch the table tennis ball, which cleverly went between their racket. Lu Dashan, who was patrolling, reached out and picked up the table tennis ball. He walked over and took the table tennis racket from Liao Qianqian's hand, and explained, "You have just started to learn table tennis, so don't be so anxious. First, use this simple method to practice how to play, and find the feeling of touching the ball. What Lu Dashan taught was the most basic ball tossing posture, which he just taught Shishi and the others how to toss the ball. Why didn't he teach them the specific movements? Because practicing the movements was very boring, and children at this age didn't necessarily learn the movements from the teacher. Just now, when Lu Dashan taught them how to toss the ball, they were a little impatient after a while. He simply let them play on the table, and then slowly teach them the more difficult movements. After giving Shishi and the others some simple instructions, Lu Dashan continued to look at the other children. As for Shishi and Lan Xian, they continued to play table tennis in high spirits. However, these simple movements were a bit difficult for the children who were not too tall. Except for Shishi, who was taller than Lan Xian and the others, Lu Xiaoyu and the others had to try their best to press down on the table tennis table and stretch out their arms to barely catch some table tennis balls. But even so, they couldn't always catch the table tennis balls, and mistakes often happened. Hey, Shishi, you hit farther away. I'm so tired from picking up the ball. Lan Xian complained a little tiredly. Lan Xian was not as tall as Shishi, and her reaction speed was not as fast as Shishi's, so she often tried to reach out her hand, but the table tennis ball bounced to the other side. Helpless, Lan Xian could only run over to pick up the ball. After a few times, the chubby girl was out of breath. Xian, I'll go pick it up. I'll help you pick it up. Seeing this, Cici called out enthusiastically and ran over, full of vitality. Shishi was now playing table tennis very happily. Although she was only bouncing the table tennis balls high up, she still felt that this sport was very interesting, especially at the moment of determining the landing point, which was particularly exciting. It was precisely because of this that Shishi didn't want to see Lan Xian stop playing with them, because she was tired of picking up the ball. Lan Xian's physical reserves were far less abundant than hers, and of course, Shishi knew this. It was just a piece of cake to pick up the ball. Lan Xian saw this and suddenly stopped complaining. She said gratefully, "Oh, that's great. Thank you, Shishi." "You're welcome." Shishi picked up the table tennis ball, ran back, and stuffed the ball into Lan Xian's hand. She said with a sweet smile, "Xian, when we go back, let's ask Dad to take us to play table tennis, okay?" "Of course, but we can teach my dad how to play table tennis." "My dad doesn't know how to play." "Your dad is so good, he should know how to play," Lan Xian said excitedly. Hee. Compared to the harmony, happiness, and laughter on the girls' side, the boys' side was more noisy, especially at the table of Chen Yuxuan and Jiang Chen. They even quarreled over the issue of the ball. No one knew the specific process, but in the end, Jiang Chen yelled angrily, "I'm not playing with you guys. I'll go to another table." Chapter 1102. Jiang Chen angrily took his racket and looked for another table. Of course, boys at this age basically didn't like to play with girls, so Jiang Chen also prioritized the boys' table. However, because boys liked to be lively, their tables were usually full, and there were 2 substitutes next to them. How could there be room for more people? "I don't want to wait that long," Jiang Chen muttered as he wandered into the girls' group. His eyes darted back and forth before he finally caught sight of a pool table in the corner with fewer people. On this table, there were still 4 clumsy-looking girls playing. Seeing them toss the ball high and then chase after it while giggling, Jiang Chen curled his lips in disdain. Too weak. Therefore, this little boy walked over casually and said proudly, "Yangshi, I'll play with you. I'll show you what it means to be the best player in the world." Cici and the girls were having a good time, but someone suddenly appeared and interrupted them. The girls looked over in confusion, but they only saw Jiang Chen waving the table tennis racket to act cool. Shishi and Lu Xiaoyu didn't react before Lan Xian pouted and said angrily, No, this is where we play. Jiang Chen, don't come over." "Why?" Jiang Chen asked, unconvinced. "Because you're bad." Lan Xian pouted and said unhappily. In fact, Lan Xian was a very generous girl. Just like when they were in kindergarten, Chen Shiyun liked to cause trouble. Lan Xian often quarreled with Chen Shiyun because she didn't like it, but she didn't take those trivial matters to heart. Later, Chen Shiyun was also influenced by her friends, and her personality became better and better. She gradually felt more like a girl, and Lan Xian became good friends with Chen Shiyun. But Lan Xian didn't like Jiang Chen, just like how she didn't like the class leader Chao Ruolin who liked to snitch on her to the teacher. There must be some very special reasons. Lan Xian felt unhappy about these reasons, but she couldn't say them out loud. Liao Qianxian helped her to say them out. This girl was usually a little like Yang Luoqi. She spoke softly, but that didn't mean that she didn't dare to speak. Liao Qianxian whispered, "Because you gave Xan a nickname," and the boys laughed at her. When Liao Qianxian said this, she also remembered that she had stood up for Lan Xian many times. Xian is not a fat pig. She's so thin now. At this moment, Lu Xiaoyu also couldn't help but criticize Jiang Chen. "Yes, and Jiang Chen, you like to gossip and bully us. I don't like you either." Perhaps boys at this age had too much energy, but there were also a lot of naughty boys in the first grade class 3, led by Chen Yuxuan and Jiang Chen. Chen Yuxuan was more boorish. His naughtiness was displayed in confrontations with the teacher. He had a lot of appeal among the boys and didn't easily arouse the dislike of girls. Although girls who liked to be quiet and study, such as Xi, didn't want to play with Chen Yuxuan, she didn't dislike Chen Yuxuan. But Jiang Chen's naughtiness was more annoying. He didn't dare to provoke the teacher, but he liked to make other students uncomfortable. In addition to being touchy, his mouth was also very talkative and annoying. Just like what Lu Xiaoyu said, Jiang Chen, in order to show his existence, also said that Lu Xiaoyu was a couple with a boy and spread rumors. This made Lu Xiaoyu very angry. Kids at this age, they were still somewhat sensible. Cici saw that her friends were all indignant, and the scenes that annoyed her when she was annoyed by Jiang Chen's nonsense also appeared in her mind. For example, last month when they first met Xi, Jiang Chen swept up some of the water on the ground after the rain, and splashed it on Xi's clean socks. Another example was one time when Xi happily walked past Jiang Chen's table. This guy suddenly stretched out a foot and almost tripped Xi. Although he didn't really want to trip Xi, Jiang Chen stretched out his foot, and then retracted it. He just wanted to scare Xi. And Jiang Chen didn't deliberately target Xi. The other pretty girls in the class were also scared by him. It seemed that this would leave a deeper impression on the girls. But this naughty move made Xi very angry. Although the little girl didn't like to complain, she still told her father when she got home. Yang Yi later also talked to the homeroom teacher. After Li Ruolin talked to Jiang Chen, he restrained himself a little bit towards Xi. Almost half a month of peace. This was why Xi wasn't as angry as Lan Xian, Liao Qianxian, and Lu Xiaoyu in the beginning. Back at the table, Jiang Chen grabbed the table tennis racket and froze there. His face was tight and he was obviously embarrassed by the girl's words. I didn't bully you." Jiang Chen stuttered and argued, but he couldn't find an excuse to explain himself. Xi stood next to Lu Xiaoyu. The little girl didn't want to say anything, but when she saw her deskmate's body trembling slightly, her face was tight, and her lips were pursed. She looked not only angry but also scared. Xi felt a surge of courage in her heart. "Jiang Chen, there are 4 of us, and we don't want to play with you. You should find someone else to play with." Xi walked in front of Lu Xiaoyu and said seriously. This was a declarative conclusion. With Xi taking the lead, the other 3 girls all nodded in agreement. Rejected by the 4 girls, Jiang Chen felt embarrassed. He said angrily, "You don't play well." "Don't play well?" Xi was a little confused. What did this have to do with them not wanting to play with Jiang Chen? "You don't play well, so I have to teach you. You're too stupid. Big idiots." Jiang Chen still felt wronged. In his excitement, there were even some tears rolling in his eyes. "We're not stupid." Xi was a little upset. She said angrily, "We all learn very well. Xian can catch the ball too. We're not idiots." "I can play too," Liao Qianxian said. "Little Fishy can play table tennis too." "Idiots, you're all idiots. I don't want to play with you." Jiang Chen's temper rose. After shouting, he turned around and left. This scene, how similar was it to his argument with Chen Yuxuan and the other boys just now? Xi was called an idiot by him. Her little mouth pouted in anger and grievance. If Jiang Chun didn't run away, Shishi would probably argue with him. In fact, the four girls were a little angry. However, Lan Xian recovered early. She waved her hand and said excitedly, "I ignore him. Shishi, let's play together. I think, regardless of what he said, we'll all have a good time." Infected by Lan Xian's laughter, Shishi's depression dissipated a lot. She shook her little head and recovered her bright smile. Yes. Xian air, let's ignore him and play by ourselves. The teacher even praised us. We're not stupid. The children were very forgetful, and the unhappiness they felt just now quickly dissipated in their cheerful laughter. However, Shishi's memory was very good. Although she later played table tennis with her friends, when she returned home in the afternoon, when Shishi talked to her father about it, the little girl was a little unhappy and asked, "Papa, why did Jiang Chun say we didn't play well? Did he say we were idiots?" "Don't worry about him. Papa told you in Xian that students like Jiang Chun have some stubborn shortcomings. If you can't persuade him to correct his shortcomings, then don't talk to him. Stay away from him and don't let him affect your normal study and life." Yang Yi smiled, rubbed Shishi's little head and said, "Just like those reporters. Isn't Papa the same? Since we can't drive them away, then we'll ignore them and live our own lives." All these years, Yang Yi had indeed cultivated his body and mind, becoming a Buddhist celebrity. If it were the year when he first came to this world, those who spent all day secretly taking photos of his daughter would have been killed by Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi's lecture was not what Shishi wanted to hear. She said unhappily, "But Papa, I think a lot of people play really well. Fishy also plays very well. Her Papa even won an award. Am I really that stupid?" "How come?" Yang Yi deliberately said in surprise. "Our Shishi is the smartest child in the world, one of." In the eyes of parents, their children were the smartest, but Yang Yi hesitated and added one of, afraid that Shishi would be proud. "It's your first time playing table tennis. It's normal that you're not good at it. But Papa believes that you can learn very well in the future. Better than those Jiang Chun." Yang Yi said encouragingly. "Really?" Shishi blinked her beautiful big eyes, looked at her father, and asked cheerfully. The little girl's clear big eyes seemed to say, "Papa, don't lie to me." "Of course I won't lie to you." Yang Yi touched his chin and laughed. "You don't believe me? Papa will buy a table tennis table tomorrow and teach you this weekend. After we learn for a while, we'll definitely be better than them." "Really? Buy a table tennis table? Wow." Shishi's eyes were almost sparkling with excitement. She held her hands and said joyfully, Then I can also let Xian Air, Fishy Sister Xiaowei, Chi-Chi Shiyun, and Zhao Yu come over to play table tennis." She just said that she wanted to learn to play table tennis. How did it become calling friends to play at home? Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He felt that he couldn't keep up with his daughter's jumping thoughts. Chapter 1103. On the weekend, the table tennis table ordered by Yang Yi was finally delivered. Several workers were busy installing it behind the house and under the awning next to the swimming pool. Cici and Lan Xian were especially excited. They swayed from side to side as they watched. The way they swayed their bodies made it seem as if they were also working. Furthermore, they seemed to be even more engrossed than the workers. "Shishi, come here." Yang Yi opened the door and called Shishi. The little girl turned her head and curiously looked at her father. After confirming that her father was indeed calling her, she ran over like the wind with her long legs. "Papa." Cici was also brimming with vitality today. Her big black gem-like eyes sparkled with excitement as she shouted in a clear and melodious voice. Yang Yi bent down and handed the tray in his hand to Shishi. He said with a smile, "Take these to the workers and tell them, 'Uncle, thank you, you have worked hard.'" Shishi blinked and reached out to take it. She said obediently, Yes, Papa, I know." Of course, how could Shishi leave Lan Xian alone? She carefully carried the tray and slowly made her way back while calling for Lan Xian to help her. Lan Xian hurriedly ran over and glanced at the cups of watermelon juice that were filled with disposable paper cups. Yang Yi stood at the back door and could hear the conversation between the two girls. Wow. Shishi, there's watermelon juice to drink. Lan Xian shouted excitedly. It's so hot, I want to drink watermelon juice. No, this is not for you. Shishi quickly said. This is for the workers. Ah. Lan Xian scratched her head regretfully. However, although she was disappointed, she still took the initiative to say, Then Shishi, I'll help you bring it to the workers. Then we'll drink watermelon juice. There must be more. Lan Xian was not just saying. She also helped Shishi pick up 2 cups of watermelon juice, which relieved a lot of Shishi's burden. Hehe. How do you know there's more? Shishi said with a smile while holding the tray and carefully watching Lan Xian's movements. Because a big watermelon can make a lot of watermelon juice. If there's no watermelon juice, we can also eat watermelon. Lan Xian said with a proud expression. The 2 girls brought the watermelon juice to the workers and naturally received all kinds of praise from the workers. You're so kind. You're beautiful and sensible. Good girls, thank you. You're welcome. Shishi and Lan Xian were a little embarrassed by the praise. They responded shyly, turned around, and ran away, leaving only giggles behind. Lan Xian wanted to eat watermelon, and Shishi also felt that it must be very comfortable to eat watermelon in such a hot weather outside. Yang Yi brought the 2 girls into the house and cut watermelon for them. At this time, Murphy hurried out of the living room and chased them out of the main door. She turned back and saw Yang Yi and smiled unhappily. Your son took away the green onions at home. Green onions? Yang Yi looked out of the side hall's window with some surprise. In the end, he found that the green onions that Murphy mentioned were not symbolic, but real green onions. On the driveway in the villa's courtyard, there was a little warrior holding a green onions upside down. The green leaves were slanted upwards, and the roots were dragging on the ground. This posture was arrogant, just like a swordsman from the end of the world who was about to fight a decisive battle. Of course, if the little guy wasn't wearing pants and only had a thick diaper, he would be even more handsome. That's my son. I'll play with him later. Yang Yi was overjoyed when he saw this scene and said with a smile. Play with what? Murphy rolled her eyes at him coquettishly. She didn't have time to reply, and hurriedly chased after them. It's okay to play with green onions, but don't wander around without pants. Even though there was a diaper to cover her private parts, Xiao Nua's short, white, fleshy legs were still exposed. It wasn't difficult to assemble the table tennis table, but this brand did a solid job. After installing the table tennis table, they tested it with various instruments to confirm the accuracy of the table's height, the level of the plane, and the stability of the center net. Only then did they feel relieved to hand it over to the customer. After seeing off the workers, Shishi and Lan Xian couldn't wait to play with the table tennis racket that Yang Yi had bought before. Xian, let me tell you, our table tennis racket is very useful. Look, it's super elastic. Shishi showed it to Lan Xian. She gently tossed the ball, and then bounced it with the table tennis racket. The table tennis ball immediately flew high. In fact, it wasn't so exaggerated. The table tennis racket at home was only good because of the friction force of the layer of glue. However, Shishi didn't know how to slice a ball, so she just felt that the table tennis racket was soft to the touch, and was more elastic than the table tennis racket at school. Thus, she had such a preconceived idea. Wow! Lan Xian also exclaimed cooperatively. The 2 girls bounced the ball back and forth as they chatted with each other in high spirits. This time, Lan Xian also found something different. Shishi, have you noticed that this table sounds very nice? Look at my table tennis, bang bang. Although Lan Xian had dubbed it herself, the crisp sound of the ping-pong balls hitting the table was indeed rather pleasing to the ears. It's true. It's so nice. Shishi also giggled. Tong Tong, who had just been caught by her mother to go upstairs to put on her pants, also walked out of the back door of the villa and came to the backyard. Seeing her sisters playing so happily, the little girl's eyes lit up, and she ran over happily. If Tong Tong wanted to play other sports, Yang Yi wouldn't mind. But now Shishi and her sisters were playing table tennis, and this racket had a certain degree of destructive power. So when Yang Yi saw this, he quickly reached out and pulled Tong Tong over. What are you going to do? Are you going to play with your sisters? Yang Yi squatted down, took the little boy over, smiled, and reached out his hand to touch his chubby little face. Where is your green onion? Tong Tong was very happy to be teased by his father. He grinned and giggled. Dumb insect, dumb insect. Mum. He pointed to the back, indicating that his mother had taken the green onion. Let's go and get it. Daddy will teach you how to fight, okay? Yang Yi purposely used his hand to imitate the edge of a blade, making a series of swishing motions. Of course, his movements were very methodical and looked very exciting. Ha! Oh! Tong Tong's eyes were wide open, and he was both surprised and happy. He opened his mouth and laughed loudly, and his little hands were clapping vigorously. So Murphy washed Tong Tong's clothes and hung them up. When she returned to the backyard, she found that Yang Yi was like a big child, waving his green onion and fighting with his son. Ha 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 ha. Tong Tong only knew how to parry, but he was very happy, and he was laughing so hard that his eyes almost disappeared. Chapter 1104. Playing around was one thing, but Shishi still needed to learn some real skills. Yang Yi didn't want to spoil his daughter and turn her into a useless vase. What's more, Shishi had also mentioned that she wanted to practice table tennis well. Yang Yi called Shishi and Lan Xian, who were still playing without any progress, back into the house. He asked them to take a break, eat some watermelon, and watch a video of the table tennis match. On the TV, 2 Chinese table tennis female players were playing table tennis back and forth. Whether it was the waving of their arms, the jumping of their steps, or the sound of the table tennis, all of it showed the audience an extremely fierce battle. The 2 young ladies were dumbfounded. Wow! Shishi was even more shocked. She held a piece of watermelon in her 2 small hands. She had only taken a bite of it a long time ago, but she was so engrossed in watching later that she forgot to eat it. The little girl watched the TV attentively. She opened her small mouth slightly and made a series of exclamations. After watching this edited video, Yang Yi turned off the TV, turned around and said with a smile, "How is it? Do you think they are very good?" Shishi and Lan Xian both nodded in agreement. Lan Xian was busy eating the watermelon. Her small mouth was moving and she didn't have time to speak. Shishi said excitedly, "Papa, these 2 sisters are so good. I almost couldn't see clearly when they were playing." In order to describe it more clearly, the little girl even put down the watermelon and jumped out of the sofa. She excitedly gestured to her father. That's right, that's right. The big sister in black hit the ball over with a whoosh. Before I could see it clearly, the big sister in red hit the ball back. So fast. I think they're really good. Even Xian air, and I can't play so fast. Playing so fast, I'll be exhausted. Lan Xian finally finished her slice of watermelon. Her mouth bulged as she said, "I feel so scared just looking at it. It's not fun to play like this. They are the best ping pong players in our country. Let alone you, even Dad can't beat them. It's normal for you to think that they are very good," Yang Yi said with a smile. "More powerful than Papa?" Shishi asked in surprise. The little girl's beautiful big eyes were wide open, as if she couldn't believe it. In her heart, her father was the most powerful. Of course, but this is also related to their long-term training. They have been practicing table tennis since they were young. When they were younger than you, they spent a lot of time training every day. Of course, Yang Yi also had his own pride. He smiled and said, "If Dad could have so much training, he wouldn't necessarily be worse than them." This was not the topic they wanted to discuss today. Yang Yi raised his voice with excitement to divert the attention of the little girls. He said with a smile, "But anyway, after watching this video, don't you feel that playing table tennis is not just the tossing of the ball that you usually play? If you add a little strength and angle, such as swinging the racket like this and hitting the ball like this, won't it be more beautiful?" Yes. Shishi was very supportive. Her little face was very excited as she nodded again and again. "Then today let me take you to play. Let's learn some new skills of playing table tennis, okay?" Yang Yi said with a smile. I want to learn. Shishi couldn't wait to jump up in front of her father. Lan Xian didn't say anything. She was busy eating another slice of watermelon. She wanted to play so fast, so she had to quickly replenish her energy. The scene changed. Yang-yi took the two little girls to the table tennis table in the backyard. He asked Shishi and Lan Xian to stand opposite him. If you want to play table tennis well, first of all, you have to find a good sense of the ball. Dad has demonstrated this to you in the room just now. When the table tennis ball bounces back, you have to be able to find its position, so that you can bounce it back. Yang-yi was referring to the fast-paced table tennis he casually performed in the room just now. So now let's try the practice of catching the ball first. I will hit the table tennis ball over, and you have to take turns to catch it back. You can use any method, just like you did before. You can bounce it back. But Shishi can hit it. I can't catch it. The table is too high. Lan Xian said with some unwillingness. Shishi is taller than me, so she can catch it. Shishi stood there, scratching her head embarrassedly. It doesn't matter. You have to believe in Dad Yang. Yang-yi said with a smile. I promise I can feed the ball to you comfortably. It started. Like doubles, Yang-yi took turns to hit the ball to Shishi and Lan Xian, so that they could take turns to catch the ball. Yang-yi's table tennis skills were actually learned on the spot. But his reflexes and muscle control were better than many people. So when he fed the ball to the two little girls, he could always control the landing point, the angle and the height of the bounce. In this way, whether it was Shishi or Lan Xian, they could easily hit the table tennis ball back. Hey. Although she was still a little flustered, she successfully caught the ball 3 times in a row. Lan Xian, who was originally a little discouraged, finally recovered a happy smile. She felt a sense of accomplishment, and her enthusiasm for playing table tennis came back. Of course, in contrast, Shishi's figure was more active. The little girl jumped around and actively caught the ball. Even when it was not her turn, when it was Lan Xian's turn, she subconsciously leaned over. When she saw Lan Xian hit the table tennis ball, she came to her senses, smiled, and took back her racket. However, although Yang-yi fed the ball to them just right, the return ball of the two little girls was like a random number, making it impossible to know where it would go. Although the ball was hanging high, the landing point was sometimes far, sometimes close, sometimes left, sometimes right, and sometimes even crooked, and the table tennis ball didn't fall on the table. Yang-yi could only rely on his long legs and arms to quickly reach the landing point of the ball and hit it back. After practicing like this for a few rounds, Yang-yi began to let the two little girls, who were in the mood to play, change the way they held the racket. Just like holding a sword, you hold the racket like this. And when you see the ball bouncing here, you hit it back at an angle. Just keep this posture, move your body, and wave your arms. Let's experience this kind of playing posture, okay? Yang-yi walked over and guided the two little girls step by step. It's fun. And it's very nice to play. Those big sisters on TV play like this. Shishi waved her arms excitedly, and showed it to Lan Xian. But it's a little heavy here. Lan Xian also followed suit, but her hand was a little small, and she felt that holding the table tennis ball with one hand was not very strong. Moreover, the racket was heavy, and it was not as comfortable as the straight racket she could hold with her left hand. Xian play like before. You can try to use this different angle to hold the ball, so that the ball doesn't fly so high, and can cross the net. Yang-yi also tried his best to teach Lan Xian. Papa, then what about me? Shishi saw that her little friend happily changed back to the original posture, and she asked with some confusion. Yang-yi said with a smile. You play like what Papa said just now. Whether it's the horizontal racket or the straight racket, in fact you can play table tennis. It mainly depends on your reaction speed, and the feeling of playing. Okay. I'll use the straight racket, I think it's super awesome, and those big sisters are very good at playing table tennis. Shishi waved the racket in a decent manner, and said happily. Shishi, this is called the horizontal racket, not the straight racket. Yang-yi hesitated for a moment, and corrected this wrong concept to his daughter. Horizontal racket? Shishi blinked her big bright eyes, and looked at her father in confusion. The little girl couldn't hold back her words, and when she had a question, she would ask it. She saw that she stretched out her arm in confusion, and then asked, "Papa, why is it the horizontal racket? You see, my hand is straight." This is a good question. Yang laughed. In fact, he also felt that this naming method was a little awkward. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.